What if the very ground beneath your feet could betray you? Picture this, a world where a single misstep in the muddy fields could spell your doom, where every dawn ushers in a fresh wave of uncertainty. This was no dream, it was the grim reality for medieval farmers, grinding and sweating under an oppressive sky, their lives more precarious than a tightrope walk over a pit of ravenous wolves. Does it make you shiver? It should. These agrarian warriors fought tooth and nail against odds so insurmountable that even the toughest modern-day survivalist would throw in the towel. Crops failed, the plague reigned, and lords demanded feudal dues like a Netflix subscription you couldn't escape. Think your 9 to 5 is tough? Try to comprehend working from sunrise to sunset, only to face the spectre of famine looming with every failed harvest. It's as if fate itself was a capricious god playing dice with their very existence. Consider the relentless grind of the seasons. One moment, the fields shimmer with promise, golden grain swaying like the laughter of a child. The next, winter descends like a vengeful spectre, stripping away hope and warmth, leaving nothing but frozen desperation in its wake. The haunting silence of an empty larder echoes louder than the blaring horns of a modern city, every growl of a stomach a reminder of vulnerability, every sigh a confession of hopelessness. And what of the wind that howls through the dirt-streaked villages? It carries whispers of betrayal, of neighbors turned enemies, as desperate souls resort to the unthinkable in search of survival. Bartering a pig for a loaf of bread? You'd be luckier than a lottery winner. Stealing a sack of grain? A death sentence, swift and unforgiving, buried under the weight of the last harvest. But there's more. How about the laughter of a child? It's a sound that should bring joy, yet, in this age, it often precedes a funeral. Infant mortality rates soared higher than any medieval castle, leaving a trail of sorrow that turned joy into a distant memory. Don't get too attached, they whispered, as if love itself could be a death knell. Let's not forget the grim humor of it all. Picture a farmer, one eye on the skies and the other on the scythe, contemplating whether it's worth it to laugh or cry at the whims of fate. If life gives you lemons, you're lucky. Medieval farmers didn't even have lemons, they had blight, droughts, and that perennial threat, the neighboring lord's taxes. As the sun bleeds into the horizon, consider this, what if you were thrust back in time, shackled to the land, fighting against forces you could neither see nor comprehend? Would you have the grit to endure the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune? Would you succumb, or would you rise, hard as the winter frost? This isn't mere history, it's a relentless spiral into survival against all odds. Are you ready for the truth? Because it's darker than the deepest shadow of a medieval castle, and once you step closer, there's no turning back. The wind howled, a banshee's wail ripping through the stillness, as the earth beneath me trembled. I stood in the mud, cold, unyielding, a spectre of despair that clung to my bones like the remnants of the harvest long gone. The sky, a bruised canvas of grey, hinted at storms brewing, both above and within the hearts of those who toiled under its oppressive weight. I could taste the bitterness of desperation in the air, a metallic tang mingling with the scent of decay that lingered in the fields. It was a smell I knew too well, it clung to the memories of my father, who had lost the last of his crops to a blight that spread like a whisper of doom. I remember the day we found the first wilted stalk, the way my father's hands trembled with the shock of it, the way his laughter, once bright as a lark at dawn, became hollow, echoing in the vast emptiness of our land. It's just a passing shadow, he had said, but I saw the lie in his eyes, dark and deep as the winter nights that came to rob us of warmth. I remember how his thoughts had turned inward, a spiraling labyrinth where hope was the monster lurking in the corners. And then there was Eleonora, my sister, who stood gazing at the horizon, her eyes tracing the path of a distant storm. It's not just the fields, she murmured, her voice trembling like the first raindrop of a long-awaited storm. It's the people. They're losing faith. Her hands were raw, calloused from work, yet she tended to the fragile hearts around her as tenderly as she would a delicate seedling. But beneath the surface of her nurturing spirit was a tempest brewing just as fierce as the thunderclouds overhead. I could see it in the way she clenched her fists, the way the winds of uncertainty whipped her dark hair into a frenzy. Then came the night of the festival, an eerie celebration that felt more like a farewell than a rejoicing of bounty. I remember the flickering torches, casting shadows that danced like spectres upon the ground, and how we laughed, trying to forget the creeping dread of another winter without food. We bathe once a year, so romance is earthy, I joked, eliciting laughter that was tinged with unease. We feasted on what little we had, but the food tasted of ash, and the wine was bitter, like the memory of last year's failed harvest. As I stood there, the land before me was a tapestry of broken dreams. The once vibrant green fields now lay dormant, tortured by the sun's relentless gaze and the storms that rained without mercy. The earth cracked, splitting open like a gaping wound, and I felt the weight of despair pressing down on my chest. I could hear the whispers of the dead, those who had succumbed to the pestilence that had swept through our village last spring. Their laughter echoed in the wind, a reminder of what was lost, a reminder of hope that flickered like the last ember of a dying fire. Eleonora, with her fierce spirit, took to the shadows, where secrets whispered like the rustling leaves. She sought the old woman who lived on the edge of the forest, a conjurer of potions and spells that danced on the edge of reason. "What can save us?" Eleonora begged, desperation dripping from her voice like the last drops of rain. The woman's eyes, clouded yet sharp, bore into her soul. "You seek salvation from the earth, but the earth is merely a mirror of your own hearts," she warned. "Until you confront the darkness within, the land will remain barren." I remember the weight of those words, how they shimmered with truth and terror. The darkness within, I felt it rise within me, a spectre of every failure, every fear, every unspoken sorrow. The truth was suffocating, I could hardly breathe, like the chill of winter settling deep in my bones. And then, without warning, the skies erupted. The storm descended, a wrathful beast that tore through the remnants of our festival. Rain poured, fierce and relentless, filling the air with a cacophony of chaos. The wind shrieked, and I could hardly hear Eleonora's frantic cries over the tumult. We ran, hearts pounding like drums, towards the safety of our home. But safety was an illusion, a fleeting thought that evaporated with the first flash of lightning, illuminating the world in stark, terrifying clarity. In that moment, I saw the truth: the land, once so giving, was now a reflection of our own fears. As the rain lashed against the earth, it became a baptism of sorts, washing away the superficiality of our existence, leaving us bare, exposed to the rawness of our humanity. I could feel Eleonora's presence beside me, her warmth like a lifeline in the tempest. "We must fight," she shouted over the roar of the chaos, her eyes ablaze with defiance. "We must reclaim what is ours." The fire in her spirit ignited something within me, a flicker of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. I remembered my father's laughter, the joy in our harvests, and I felt a surge of determination rise within me, fierce and unrelenting. Yet even as I gripped Eleonora's hand, I could sense the ghosts of those we had lost, swirling around us like shadows, reminding us of the fragility of life. The storm raged on, an unforgiving reminder that the world could be both beautiful and brutal, a symphony of existence that played on despite our struggles, as relentless as the tides that crashed against the cliffs. And as the rain fell, washing the land anew, I realized, this was not just a battle against the elements, it was a confrontation with ourselves. The agrarian landscape, with its rolling hills and rich soil, was a canvas of our struggles, our fears, and our dreams. As we stood amidst the chaos, hearts pounding in unison, we became part of something greater, a tapestry woven through time, binding us to the land, to each other, and to the very essence of life itself. The storm would pass, and in its wake, we would find ourselves changed, forever marked by the elemental forces that shaped our existence. Our fight had only just begun. The wind howled through the twisted, gnarled trees, a banshee's wail that sent chills racing down my spine. Each gust carried with it the bitter scent of despair, a whisper of decay clinging to the air like a dark omen. I stood there, knees trembling in the frosty mud, as the sky rumbled with a fury only nature could muster. Lightning split the horizon, illuminating the silhouette of a farmhouse, my farmhouse, its timbers creaking under the weight of the storm, like a dying man grasping for breath. I remember how we thought we could tame the land, how naive we were, underestimating the ferocity of Earth's whims. My brother, Ethan, once full of bravado, now a mere shadow of himself, stood beside me. The rain fell like daggers, and I could see the corners of his mouth twitching downward, a silent plea for hope in a world intent on swallowing us whole. "We were supposed to harvest the corn today," he muttered, his voice cracking, a raw edge of despair lacing his words. The absurdity of that statement hit me like a punch to the gut. Corn, once golden and promising, now lay flattened in the fields, trampled by the storm's relentless assault. I wanted to scream, to shake him out of his stupor. "It's just corn," I wanted to say. "It's just dirt." But the truth was, it wasn't. It was everything we had, our dreams, our sweat, our very existence. And there was Marissa, our sister, a tempest of her own, her heart as wild and unpredictable as the storm above. I could see her pacing in the doorway, her hands wringing together, the way she always did when she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. "We can't lose it all, we just can't," she cried, her voice quaking like the very ground beneath us. A desperate mantra that echoed in the corners of my mind as I turned to face the chaos unfolding. I remembered her laughter once, a bright, tinkling sound. Now, it felt like a ghost hanging in the air, taunting us with what we had lost. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, sharp and overwhelming, a reminder of the life we had tried to coax from it. I thought of the sun-drenched days that preceded this calamity, where the soil felt alive, pulsing with potential. But here we were, trapped in a relentless cycle of hope and despair, the elements our relentless adversaries. The rain, once a gentle caress, had become a punisher, a reminder of our fragility. It was a cruel twist of fate, this land of beauty becoming our tormentor. In that moment, I couldn't help but reflect on the landscape that had shaped us, the undulating hills, the sprawling fields, the weathered stones that bore witness to our toil. Each rock, each clod of earth, held a story, a memory of hands that had once toiled in unity. And yet, that same land, sculpted by seasons of bounty, now turned jagged and cruel, felt like a betrayal. How could something so nurturing become the very thing that sought to devour us? Lightning sliced through the sky again, illuminating the shadows that danced at the edges of my vision. They were there, those memories, those ghosts of everything we had lost. I could see them in the flicker of the storm, faces etched in the darkness, a mother's smile as she showed us how to plant the seeds, the laughter of children playing hide and seek in the corn rows, the bittersweet taste of first love shared under the expansive sky. "Ethan, focus," I urged him, my voice barely audible above the tempest. "What are we going to do?" The desperation in my tone was palpable, and I felt his gaze shift from the storm to me, a fleeting moment of connection amidst chaos. His eyes, once vibrant, now mirrored the storm's fury, dark, turbulent, and ache-filled. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't know if we can do this anymore." The words hung in the air like a death knell, echoing in the chambers of my heart. I wanted to scream at him for giving up, I wanted to shake him out of his despair, to remind him of the sunflowers we'd planted, bold and bright, how they had turned their faces towards the sun even in the darkest of times. But the truth stung like salt in a wound, the storm was relentless, and so were the questions that plagued us. What would happen when the storm subsided? Would our dreams be washed away, a casualty of nature's fury? Or would we emerge, battered but resolute, like the resilient corn that, despite everything, still fought its way through the earth? Marissa's voice broke through my thoughts, a fragile thread weaving through the chaos. "Maybe we should leave," she said, her words laced with a fear that was almost tangible. "Find somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't fight back." The thought settled over me like a cold shroud. Leaving? The very idea sent a surge of panic rippling through my veins. This land was our legacy, our home. I could already hear the ancestral whispers in the wind, urging us to stand our ground, to fight for every inch of soil we had come to love. But what if the earth continued to rage? What if every storm was a herald of more destruction? I glanced at Ethan, who stood frozen, his face pale against the backdrop of fury. I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the shadow of surrender creeping in. And it terrified me. The sky roared again, and I felt the earth tremble beneath us, a reminder of our own insignificance against the vastness of the cosmos. We were but specks in the grand tapestry of existence, battling against forces we didn't fully understand. But as I looked at my brother and sister, I knew we had to choose, fight or flight, love or despair. And there it was, the crux of our existence, the heart that beat within the storm. Each drop of rain, each crack of thunder, an echo of our struggles. I could feel it deep within me, the pulse of the earth beneath my feet, a symphony of life and death, struggle and resilience. The storm raged on, but somewhere, in the depths of my soul, I knew the battle was far from over. Each heartbeat was a declaration, a reminder of our humanity. No matter how fierce the landscape, how cruel the climate, we would not be broken. We were entwined with the earth, its fury, its beauty. And as the storm surged around us, I knew this was just the beginning. The confrontation awaited, a reckoning that would shape our futures, binding us to the land, to each other, and to the relentless cycle of hope and despair. The castle looms above the village like a vulture, its stones grey as the smog that clings to the air, a grim reminder of the lives tethered to its whims. The bell tolls, a sonorous echo that vibrates through the marrow of my bones, marking the hour of the execution. I can feel the dread pulsing in the air, thick like fog, clinging to my lungs. People gather, shadows shuffling, their faces pale and drawn, eyes wide with a mix of terror and morbid curiosity. This is our life, tethered to the fate of the few who dwell in the castle. I remember the day my father knelt before Lord Edmund, his coarse hands trembling as he pledged his loyalty, his life chained to the whims of a man who wore power like a crown of thorns. "I am nothing," he said, a broken whisper, "but a vassal in your service." I remember the warmth of his hand on my shoulder, the way it felt like a weight, like the world pressing down on me. I was a child then, but I understood the hierarchy. I understood the price of respect, of land, of life. A skewed ledger of power and submission, where the ink was blood, and the pages turned in agony. Lord Edmund, with his hawk-like gaze, stood atop the battlements, surveying the serfs below, our lives mere playthings in his grand theatre of control. He wore his cruelty like a cloak, and I watched him, my heart pounding like a drum, the rhythm of fear echoing through my veins. Every flicker of his gaze sent shivers down my spine, each moment a stark reminder that here, in this feudal web, we were nothing but pawns. But there was also Ilara, the peasant girl with wild, untamed hair, who dared to dream beyond the fields. I watched her as she threw caution to the wind, her laughter ringing like bells, challenging the very fabric of our existence. "We're more than this," she would say, fiery in her conviction, her hands gesturing wildly as if she could grasp the stars. "We deserve more than the dirt beneath our feet." Her spirit ignited something inside me, a flicker of hope, a spark of rebellion. But hope is a dangerous thing in a world ruled by fear. I remember how the wind would catch her hair, sending it spiraling like a tempest around her head, and for a moment, everything felt possible. But then the bell tolled again, and reality crashed down like a wave, drenching us in the coldness of our fate. The Lord's guards, clad in iron, moved like shadows, enforcing the law that crushed any flicker of dissent. I saw the fear in Ilara's eyes, the way her light dimmed when she caught sight of them, the stark reality of her dreams dashed against the unforgiving stones of our existence. An executioner, the grim jester of this macabre court, sharpened his axe under the watchful gaze of the Lord. The blade glinted, a cruel reminder of the price of defiance. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, sharp enough to slice through skin. Would they come for Ilara next? The thought wrapped around my heart like a vice, tightening until I could barely breathe. "Will you fight for me?" I whispered to Ilara, my voice barely a breath, lost in the cacophony of the crowd. "If they take you, I'll," she silenced me with a fierce gaze, the same fire that danced in her spirit igniting in her eyes. "We fight by living, not dying," she said, defiance lacing her tone. "We endure." Endure. The word hung heavy between us, a promise and a curse. How long could we endure? The peasants, those nameless faces, were shackled to their lords, their lives dictated by the whims of the powerful. I felt the weight of their struggles, we were all connected, bound by invisible chains of duty, loyalty, and fear. The crowd screamed as the axe fell, a sound that reverberated through the very stones of the castle, a bone-chilling reminder of our place in this cruel hierarchy. And yet, as the blood pooled on the ground, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of something else, rebellion. The realization crashed over me like thunder, we were not just victims, we were a force waiting to be unleashed. But what could we do against the lords who towered over us? We were mere whispers against a storm, fragile against the weight of history. I looked at Ilara, the fire in her heart fighting against the despair, and I knew we had to make a choice. Our lives were a tapestry woven with blood and tears, a cruel reminder that in this feudal system, we were born to serve or die. I watched as the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows stretching long and dark, creeping into our hearts. In this dance of power and subservience, we were all players, some willing, some trapped. I remember standing there, heart pounding, as the embers of revolution sparked in the depths of my mind. What if we chose to rise? What if we chose to shatter the chains binding us to this cursed fate? But the night fell heavy, and with it came silence, the kind that echoes in the soul, a reminder of the weight of our choices. The castle, that vulture, watched over us with cold, unyielding eyes, as if it knew something we didn't. I felt the weight of time pressing down, a clock ticking away our chances, and I clung to Ilara's words, "We fight by living." But how long could we live in this torment? The night stretched on, holding our fears hostage, and I realized, in the shadows of the feudal system, we were more than just serfs, we were the restless souls yearning to reclaim our fate. As I stood there, caught between despair and hope, I knew one thing: this was just the beginning. The confrontation between shadows and light was brewing, and I could feel it in my bones, a storm gathering. The very fabric of our existence was about to unravel, and no one, neither the lords, nor the executioner, nor the shadows of the past, could stand in the way of what was coming. And in that moment, amidst the rising tension, I vowed to fight, to break the chains, to let my voice echo in the halls of power until the very walls trembled. The time for silence was ending, and the feudal system that had held us prisoner for so long was about to face its reckoning. The sun hung low in the sky, a swollen ember threatening to extinguish itself, casting long shadows over the fields. I remember watching the earth tremble beneath the weight of the hooves, a stampede of anxiety pounding through my chest. Menacing whispers filled the air, laced with the scent of impending doom. Simon, my brother, stood frozen, dirt caked under his nails, eyes wide with dread. He was a farmer, yes, but in that moment, he was a boy again, lost, vulnerable, caught in the web of a feudal system that choked the very breath from his lungs. It was harvest season, but not a single sheaf had been gathered. Harvest meant tribute, tribute meant the Lord's men, those ironclad spectres of our misery, would descend like crows, their eyes glinting with greed, all too eager to pluck the fruits of our labor. I remember the stories our mother told of the time she hid under the floorboards, heart racing, as the Lord's knights thundered through our village like an ominous storm. The echo of their laughter still haunts the shadows of my memory, a reminder of our powerlessness. "Stop trembling, Simon." "They can sense fear," I whispered, gripping his shoulder, but my own voice quavered. I was meant to be the protector, yet here I stood, a pillar of uncertainty. The land was sacred, but it was also a shackle, binding us to a cycle of toil and tribulation in service of a man who would never know our names. In the distance, silhouettes of the Lord's men materialized, their armor glinting like malevolent stars. My heart raced faster, pounding against my ribcage, a frantic warning pulsing through me. I could almost taste the bitterness of their demands, a percentage of our yield, a fraction of our dignity. Farmers' rights? A laughable concept buried beneath layers of tradition and entitlement. We were ghosts, specters haunting our own land, forced to kneel in the dust before a throne we would never sit upon. The air thickened with dread as Simon turned to me, tears brimming in his eyes. "What if they take everything? What if," his voice cracked, and my heart shattered. He was just a boy, a simple farmer with dreams of a better life, perhaps of marrying Eliza, the baker's daughter, whose laughter danced like sunlight across the fields. But those dreams were doused in the cruel reality of our existence. I remembered my own aspirations once, buried deep beneath the weight of responsibility and despair. I longed to break free from this relentless cycle, to breathe the fresh air of autonomy, to claim a life that belonged to me. But the feudal system was an unyielding beast, devouring hope like it devoured the crops. And then, from that suffocating silence, emerged a voice. A voice that carried the weight of rebellion, of fire and fury. Old Thomas, bent and gnarled like the ancient oaks, stepped forward, the remnants of his youth flickering in his eyes. He was a man who had seen the world turn and twist, who had watched the Lord's men drag away his children, their backs bent with the burden of another unjust tax. "Enough," he bellowed, a tempest rising within him. "We are not cattle. The fields belong to us, our sweat and blood have birthed this bounty." The wind seemed to carry his words, electrifying the air with a sense of solidarity. A flicker of hope ignited within me, but I was also terrified. What if this spark turned into a wildfire? What if it consumed us all? The crowd murmured, uncertainty swirling among us like a living thing. I glanced at Simon, whose eyes shone with the flame of possibility, a fire that mirrored Thomas's fury. But I could also see the fear, the haunting specters of the past that loomed over us. The fear of retribution hung like a dark curtain, blocking out the light of change. What did we owe to this land? What rights did we hold? Would standing against the tide swallow us whole? As I stood there, paralyzed between two worlds, the quiet acceptance of our fate and the deafening roar of rebellion, I felt the weight of centuries pressing down upon me. The feudal system was not just a structure, it was alive, a beast with fangs that sank deep into the flesh of the earth and bled us dry. I could see it now. Each villager, each farmer, wore a mask of resignation that hid their deepest desires, their hunger for change. I saw Eliza, standing at the edge of the gathering, her eyes full of longing. She was a reminder of everything we fought for, yet she was also a ghost of what we had lost. The love we sought was entangled in the thorns of our reality, suffocated by the hands that held the reins of our existence. Then, a thunderclap, a clash of steel against steel erupted from the horizon, and we all froze. The Lord's men were here, and the weight of fear bore down like a storm cloud ready to burst. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice slicing through the tension. I was a shield, yet my own resolve wavered. I could feel the tremors of panic radiating from the villagers, the whispers of despair clawing at their hearts. Old Thomas stepped forward, fearlessly facing the approaching darkness. "We stand together," he roared, a rallying cry that seemed to echo through time. "We are the lifeblood of this land. Without us, they are nothing." The fire in his eyes ignited something in me, a fierce longing to be more than just a player in this cruel game. But the confrontation was inevitable, a dark tide crashing against the fragile shore of our hopes. The figures of the knights loomed larger, their shadows swallowing the light, and I could feel the earth tremble beneath the weight of our fate, our rights, our responsibilities, our very lives hanging in the balance. The time had come to confront not just the knights but the very essence of a system that had dehumanized us for too long. Hope and despair intertwined, a dance of shadows against the fading light, a reminder that we were not merely farmers, we were men and women who bled for change, for a life unchained from the shackles of oppression. Yet, as the clash neared, as the shape of destiny loomed large before us, I realized that this moment was not an ending, it was a beginning, an echo in the chasm of time, a heartbeat drumming against the stillness of the night. The feudal system was not just a backdrop, it was the very essence of our struggle, the ghost that haunted our every breath. And as the sounds of conflict grew louder, I felt the weight of history upon my shoulders, a history that was not yet written, a future that was still ours to claim. The wind howled like a banshee through the thatched rooftops of the village, a cacophony of desperation that sent shivers down my spine. I stood in the middle of the dirt road, my boots sinking into the mud, heart pounding like a war drum, as the sky rumbled ominously above me. Around me, the faces of my neighbors twisted in fear, eyes wide and haunted, their breath steaming in the frigid air, each exhale a ghost of what might soon be. "Run!" cried Alaric, his voice cracking with the weight of despair. A father, a husband, his hands trembled, clutching a half-eaten loaf of bread, the last remnant of a meager meal. His son, Jacob, only 7, clutched at his leg, oblivious to the chaos, blissfully unaware of the terror that had entered our lives like a thief in the night. I could see the bruised color of fear on Alaric's face, the way his jaw clenched, the way he was trying to hold it together for his boy. "Where?" I gasped, my voice barely a whisper against the shouting wind. "Where do you go when the air is thick with dread and the ground feels like it's swallowing you whole?" "Anywhere but here," he shouted back, desperation cracking through the last remnants of his courage. I looked around, at the crumbling homes, the shadows that danced in the corners of my vision, the sense of doom that hung over us like a heavy shroud. The peasant class, what were we but a flickering candle in a storm? My heart raced not just for the imminent threat that loomed over us but for the reality of our existence. I remembered the stories told by my mother of the lavish banquets held in the castles where lords and ladies feasted while we struggled to make ends meet, our dreams trudging through mud and misery. I remembered the laughter of children as they played in the streets, innocent and unaware, their happiness a stark contrast to the struggle that defined our lives. I remember the dirt under my nails after a long day in the fields, the sun blistering my back, laboring for a few coins tossed carelessly as if they were nothing but paper scraps, while the rich grew plump and powerful, feasting on our sweat and toil. I remembered the night we lost our neighbor, Thomas, dragged away by the king's men for the crime of dissent. I still hear his screams echoing through the village, reverberating in my heart like a haunting melody. A stark reminder that we were expendable, pawns in their game. Vera! Alaric's voice broke through the fog of my memories. I turned to see him desperately trying to push through the crowd, his eyes searching, not just for me, but for hope. But hope was a barren land, with nothing but cracked earth and the ghost of dreams. Stick together! I shouted, trying to rally my neighbors. My voice was shaky, I could feel the weight of their despair pressing down on me, an anchor threatening to drag me into the depths of hopelessness. We were bound by blood and struggle, each scar a testament to our perseverance, yet the air was thick with the fear of what lay ahead. The shadows seemed to inch closer, as if they were alive, feeding on our despair. I could almost hear the whispers of our ancestors, the ghosts of those who fought and failed, echoing through the alleyways. They watched us, judging our actions, reminding us that we were the remnants of a forgotten time. Vera! Alaric's voice rose again, sharper this time. The urgency in his tone jolted me. I stumbled toward him, the mud sucking at my feet, pulling me back, anchoring me in place. We have to go. The lords, they're coming. I felt a pang in my chest. The lords, those glittering, silver-tongued devils who lived in their castles, oblivious to our plight, delighted in our suffering. The very thought of them stirred something deep within me, a potent mix of anger and fear, bubbling beneath the surface, volcano-like, threatening to erupt. Jacob's small hand squeezed mine, and I looked down into his innocent eyes, filled with trust and confusion. A part of me wanted to shield him from the harsh reality of our world. But how could I? Stay close, I murmured, forcing a strength I didn't feel, the weight of my promise hanging heavily in the air. We raced through the narrow streets, the cries of anguish echoing behind us, a chilling reminder of what we were leaving behind. The villagers collided with one another, driven by the primal urge to survive, their faces a tapestry of fear, anger, and desperation. It was chaos, a beautiful, tragic chaos, a painting of survival on the canvas of despair. As we reached the edge of the village, I glanced back, heart pounding, seeing the flickering torches in the distance, shadows swarming like locusts, greedily consuming everything in their path. But it wasn't just fear that clutched at my heart, it was the weight of our existence, the reality of being a peasant, the constant struggle against a system designed to crush us. Peasants were not merely workers, we were a mosaic of stories stitched together by hardship. Every wrinkle on Alaric's brow told tales of sleepless nights, every hollow laugh was a reminder of lost dreams. We were not mere numbers, we were flesh and blood, hopes and fears, carried on the shoulders of history. I could see it clearly now, the rich tapestry of our lives. There was Elda, the herbalist, her hand stained with the earth, weaving magic from plants, defying the very laws of nature. And then there was Garrick, the blacksmith, his muscles honed by labor, a heart forged in resilience, each clang of his hammer an anthem of defiance. In the face of oppression, we were a chorus of voices, singing our existence against the backdrop of silence. We were the heartbeat of the land, the pulse that drove it forward, lost yet found in our shared struggles. Our diversity was our strength, woven together in a narrative of survival, each thread a different hue, telling a story of our unique battles. But that was the irony, wasn't it? Here we were, united by our struggles, yet fractured by our dreams. The children longed for freedom, the elderly clung to their memories, and the young men and women dared to imagine a world beyond the walls of servitude. Don't look back! Alaric's shout snapped me from my reverie, and I turned away from the village. The past, with all its scars, threatened to swallow me whole. The ghosts of our history loomed large, a haunting reminder of what we were fighting against, and I could almost hear them whispering, urging us to forge a new path. Together, I said, my voice steady. We fight together. And as we pushed forward, the horizon stretching before us like an uncharted sea, I realized that we were not just peasants, we were warriors, defenders of our existence, our very souls intertwined in a battle that had just begun. The road ahead, uncertain and fraught with danger, pulsed with a rhythm of resilience, a heartbeat echoing through the heart of a peasant class that refused to be silenced. The wind howled behind us, but ahead lay the unknown, ripe with possibility, a new chapter waiting to be written. The wind howled through the gnarled branches of the ancient oak tree, its skeletal fingers clawing at the darkening sky, as if grasping for salvation. Beneath its twisted shade, a peasant named Marek knelt in the mud, clutching a wilted sprig of thyme, its scent barely managing to pierce the stench of despair that enveloped him. The ground was sodden, soaked with the tears of 100 broken dreams, and he could feel the weight of history pressing down on him like a millstone around his neck. I remember, he whispered, the words scraping against his throat, when time tasted like hope. Now, hope was a distant memory, lost among the endless fields of his lord's disdain. Across the village square, where the cobblestones were slick with rain and sorrow, stood Anya, a woman whose beauty was as fragile as the paper-thin petals of the flowers she sold. Her hands, cracked and calloused, twitched at her side as she watched the market dissolve into chaos. Fights erupted over scraps of produce, the sounds of shouting drowning out the last vestiges of civility. I remember, she murmured, a ghost of a smile lingering on her lips, when laughter was worth more than gold. Her heart, however, clung to that laughter like a moth to a flame, risking everything for a glimmer of joy in the oppressive darkness. And in the shadow of the tavern, where the laughter echoed off the rotting wooden beams, stood Thomas, a man whose dreams had been suffocated under the weight of expectation. He raised a tankard high, his voice slurring with liquid courage, to the lords who suckle at the tit of our labor. The words hung heavy in the air, electric with defiance, yet his heart raced with fear. He could taste the bitterness of rebellion on his tongue, but behind his bravado lay a quivering soul, afraid of the reprisal that surely awaited him. I remember, he thought, his mind drifting to his childhood, when the stars shimmered with possibility, not dread. These peasants, Marek, Anya, Thomas, each wore their hardships like armor, but beneath it all, they bled the same. Marek was a serf, bound to the land as if shackled by an invisible chain, his life dictated by the whims of a lord whose face he had never seen. The soil had become his only companion, a cruel mistress that yielded only enough to keep him tethered to existence. Each sunrise brought the promise of toil, and each sunset whispered of dreams long buried in the loamy earth. The weight of his lineage pressed down, forging a man who bore the scars of unyielding labor, yet inside him flickered a flame, a yearning for more than this cage of dirt and sweat. Anya, the free woman of the village, sold her wares with a smile that belied her own chains. She was neither rich nor powerful, yet her spirit soared with the grace of a bird trapped in a gilded cage. Laughter was her currency, and each chuckle was a rebellion against the despair that threatened to swallow her whole. But beneath her cheerful facade, the spectre of loneliness loomed, haunting every interaction. What is love, she pondered bitterly, if it can't be cultivated like a garden? Yet her heart did not know how to stop its relentless beating, how to silence the longing for a connection that transcended the mud underfoot. Then there was Thomas, a rogue spirit caught between the world of the tavern and the fields. He was a laborer, but his heart beat to a different rhythm. The tavern served as both sanctuary and prison, where laughter and despair intertwined with the clinking of tankards. In this smoky refuge, he felt alive, until reality seeped back in, reminding him of the injustice that swirled outside those walls. How absurd it was that a man could drown his sorrows while the world bled around him. I remember, he thought, when dreams were not just whispers in the night. Yet how could he chase them when his feet were mired in the muck of obligation? The tension crackled like electricity in the air, drawing the three of them toward an unwitting convergence. Marek's hands trembled as he clutched the time, its memory of a brighter past invigorating his resolve. Anya's heart quickened as she caught glimpses of Thomas's bravado, her admiration mingling with an unquenchable desire to break free from the chains of her own making. And Thomas, amidst his drunken bravado, sensed the weight of their shared anguish, a silent call to arms echoing within him. And just like that, the world exploded around them. A cry rang out, a scream of desperation that pierced through the cacophony, drawing their attention. A Lord's guard had arrived, his armor glinting ominously in the fading light, a spectre of authority. The peasants recoiled, a wave of fear sweeping through the crowd. "Run!" Marek's voice broke through the noise, filled with raw urgency. "Run, or be trampled beneath their boots." But as he spoke, the ground felt like it was shifting beneath him, the very earth seemed to rise in rebellion, echoing the heartbeat of 1,000 oppressed souls. Anya's eyes locked on Thomas, adrenaline coursing through her as panic ignited within her. "What do we do?" The question hung in the air, a lifeline thrown into the swirling chaos. Her heart raced, a drumbeat of defiance against the doom looming in the shadows. "Their power is a facade," Thomas shouted, embers of courage igniting within him. "We are the blood, the sweat, the tears. Together, we are unstoppable." Marek seized the moment, the wilted time now a standard in his hand, a symbol of hope that refused to wither. "More than peasants, we are a storm waiting to break." The words surged forth, a rallying cry that echoed through the trembling crowd. In that moment, as shadows danced and laughter mingled with fear, the boundaries of their worlds began to dissolve. Each heartbeat pulsated with urgency, each breath a testament to the lives they had led, the burdens they had borne. They stood on the precipice of a new understanding, a fragile thread connecting their fates, waiting for the storm to roll in, ready to change everything. The confrontation loomed, an emotion-laden climax that felt as ancient as the earth itself, a reckoning that would reshape the very fabric of their lives. And as the first raindrops fell, mingling with the sweat and tears of 1,000 struggles, the clock ticked toward a reckoning. The sky darkened, a tapestry of chaos and hope woven together, the stage set for a clash that would echo through time. The wind howled through the barren fields, a bone-chilling wail that seemed to echo off the very stones of the earth. I stood in the midst of it, heart racing, consumed by the tension that crackled in the air like the ominous rumble of distant thunder. A single crow cawed, its black feathers glistening under the pale light of a waning moon, as if heralding the darkness that lay ahead. The ground beneath me was a patchwork of mud and sorrow, where the land itself seemed to mourn, haunted by the ghosts of those who toiled and bled for it. I remember the stories whispered in the shadows, tales of lords and ladies cloaked in silk, their laughter ringing hollow atop opulent castles, where the walls echoed with power but the heart of the land lay bare and broken. I remember the church, a looming titan, its steeples reaching for the heavens, yet its grip tightening around the throats of the poor, the very souls it claimed to protect. And there was Alice, a peasant girl with wild hair and fierce eyes, who dared to dream beneath the oppressive weight of iron chains that bound her to the earth. Alice stood at the edge of the field, raw emotion etched in every line of her face. "This land is ours," she shouted, fists clenched, voice trembling with a mix of sorrow and rage. They take, and we are left with nothing but scraps." Her passion ignited a fire within me, a flicker of hope against the suffocating despair that surrounded us. She was the embodiment of rebellion, the spark that could ignite a wildfire in the hearts of the oppressed. But it wasn't just the land that was in turmoil, it was the very souls of those who walked upon it. I thought of Lord Ellard, the nobleman whose castle loomed like a dark spectre over our village, the fires of his greed warming his hearth while ours lay cold. How many times had I seen him on his gallant horse, a gilded cage of privilege wrapped around his heart? He was a man wrestled by his own demons, a puppet dancing on the strings of expectation and legacy. I could see it in his eyes, the fear of failure, the weight of history pressing down, but his solutions came wrapped in iron and blood. "Tell me, my dear Alice," he had once sneered during a feast I dared to eavesdrop on, "why should I care for the land that feeds your rabble? It is mine by birthright." His laughter had been a cruel symphony, a cacophony of privilege that echoed through the cold stone halls of his castle, each note a reminder of our place beneath him. But Alice, with her spirit unyielding, was not one to let injustice slip silently into the night. "You may own the land, Lord Ellard, but you do not own the hearts of those who bleed for it." Her defiance was like a bell tolling in the night, ringing with a truth that shook both the noble and the pious. The church had its own stake in this grim theatre of power. Revered as a bastion of hope, it wielded its might with a heavy hand, sending prayers like arrows into the night, while its coffers grew fat from the tithes of the desperate. I watched as Father Thomas, cloaked in clerical robes, his face a mask of piety, preached salvation from the pulpit, yet his gaze drifted longingly towards the offerings, the glint of gold as seductive as a lover's embrace. Did he not see the suffering in the eyes of those who knelt before him? Every Sunday, he would fill us with tales of redemption, but when Alice dared to challenge him, her voice a trembling tremor of truth, he cast her aside like a weed in his pristine garden. The Lord's will is not to be questioned, he declared, but I could see the fear behind his eyes, a fear of losing his grip, of the very foundation of his power collapsing like a house of cards. Father, your flock is starving, and yet you preach to us about charity while you collect the spoils of our labor. Alice's voice rang through the chapel, a siren cry that tore through the air, sending shivers down spines. She stood alone against the tide, but I could feel the collective heartbeat of the congregation, a pulse that echoed her defiance, a reminder that our pain was not silent. And the shadows loomed larger now, creeping over the land, creeping into our hearts. It was a dance of despair, this relentless pull between the nobility who squeezed the life from the earth and the church that clutched at our souls. We were caught in an endless cycle, spinning like autumn leaves caught in a storm, waiting for the winds of change to sweep us up, to lift us away from the decay. Alice would not be silenced. The fire within her burned brighter, illuminating the darkest corners of our struggle. We are the soil, she cried, voice rising with each word, echoing across the fields like a battle cry. We are the roots that hold this land together. We will rise. And with those words, something shifted in the air, a charged moment suspended in time, an electric tension that rippled through the very fabric of our existence. The ground beneath us trembled, as if the land itself was waking from a slumber, stirring in response to our anguish and fury. I felt it in my bones, the clash of empires, the pull of history, a reminder that every inch of this soil had soaked up the blood and tears of those who came before us. We were not mere tenants, we were the heartbeat of this land, and our struggle was a song that could not be silenced. And as the shadows deepened, I looked at Lord Ellard and Father Thomas, and they too were caught in the web of their own making, trapped in the labyrinth of their ambition and fear. I could see it in the tightening of their jaws, the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. The confrontation was coming, a storm brewing on the horizon, and I could feel the winds shift. In that moment, the air was thick with the scent of rain and revolution, and I knew this was the beginning of something monumental. A clash was inevitable, and the very earth beneath us would bear witness. The land belonged to the living, to those who fought for it, who dreamed of a future written in sweat and blood, and the shadows could not hold us forever. I closed my eyes and breathed in the raw, electric air, feeling the pulse of history thrumming through me, a reminder that we were part of something larger, a tide that could not be contained. The darkness would come, but the dawn was waiting just beyond the horizon. And in that heartbeat of hope, I knew this was our moment. The sun hung low, a molten disk poised to swallow the world whole. Shadows stretched like fingers across the cracked earth, where a lone figure knelt, dirt caked under fingernails, breath heavy with desperation. Clara's heart raced as she clutched a handful of wilting grass, the last remnant of a life that had once felt abundant. Each blade whispered a name, Hope. Each whisper twisted like a knife, reminding her of what had been snatched away by unseen hands, a distant laugh echoing through the barren fields where crops once danced like wild children. Clara! The voice cut through her thoughts, a sharp, frantic bark of authority. She turned, eyes locking onto the looming silhouette of Edgar, the landowner, his presence like a dark cloud rolling in to eclipse what little light remained. His wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow over his face, but the set of his jaw betrayed contempt, a smirk dancing just beyond reach. Get up, he commanded, the ground trembling beneath the weight of his disdain. You'll ruin the land. Ruin. The word hung in the air like a funeral dirge. She stood, fists clenching as the dirt fell from her hands, echoes of the dreams she had sown in that soil now buried and nameless. This is my land too, Edgar, she fought back, her voice trembling with the strength of 1,000 storms. You don't own the soil that gives life. A flash of anger ignited in Edgar's eyes. I own the title. The deed. You're nothing but a trespasser, Clara. Remember that. The words dripped like poison, each syllable designed to cover wound deeper than the last. her breath caught, the sting of his reality a cruel reminder of her place in this dance of power, an endless waltz of fear and vulnerability. Then there was Jacob, the farmer across the road, watching from the edge of his field, caught in a limbo of silence. His hands, calloused and weary, hung like heavy weights at his sides. He had fought the fight before, had felt the sting of Edgar's wrath, tasted the bitter flavor of defeat. He remembered the night the crops had withered under the burning gaze of a vengeful sun, and Edgar had stood over him, a ghost in the moonlight, laughing as though their struggles were mere entertainment. "I remember," Jacob muttered under his breath, the words slipping from his lips as though they were the remnants of a broken promise. "I remember the days when land meant life, not chains." The memories blurred in the haze of nostalgia and bitterness, every harvest a reminder of the price paid, every grain of wheat a sacrifice at the altar of land tenure. Clara's eyes met Jacob's, a silent plea passing between them. They were bound by hope, but shackled by despair, partners in a dance they had never chosen. And yet, there was something in the way Jacob clenched his fists, a flicker of rebellion igniting a flame within her. She took a step closer, her voice rising above the cacophony of their shared despair. "We can fight this. Together. We won't be silenced." Edgar's laughter rose, cold and mocking, slicing through the tension like a blade. "Fight? What do you have? Words? Empty dreams? This land is mine, and I will do with it as I please." He stepped closer, a predator circling its prey, the air thick with the weight of impending confrontation. "You forget, Clara, that I hold the power." "Power?" The word echoed through Clara's mind, a chilling reminder of the divide that had been carved into the very fabric of their lives. It was the wall between dreams and reality, the chasm separating the landowners from the farmers. She felt the weight of history press down, a ghostly reminder of every struggle fought and lost, the dispossession, the blood spills, the injustices that lingered like the scent of rain on parched earth. "Maybe it's time we changed that," Jacob's voice broke the silence, trembling with a ferocity she had never witnessed before. He stepped forward, shoulders squared, a defiance rising like steam from the cracks of a barren landscape. "We're not livestock to be herded. We're not ghosts in your game, Edgar." The shift was palpable, the air crackling with tension as the three of them stood at the precipice of something irreversible. Clara felt the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the heartbeat of a land that had nurtured them, each beat a call to arms, echoing the resilience of generations lost to the whims of the powerful. "I remember," she whispered as if to fortify herself against the tide of despair that threatened to drown her. "I remember the stories of those who stood against the tide, against the mighty." Edgar's face hardened, he stepped back, the mask of confidence slipping, revealing a flicker of uncertainty. Clara pressed on, her voice rising, a clarion call against the night. "You think you can own the land? It breathes, it lives. You're merely a steward of its legacy. But she gestured between herself and Jacob, we are the roots that dig deep, the seeds that will sprout in the face of drought." The shadows stretched longer as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in violent hues of orange and red. The world around them held its breath, the cosmos bearing witness to this age-old struggle, the silent combat of ownership versus belonging. And in that moment, time fractured, the world beyond them faded into a blur, leaving only the three of them suspended in a moment that felt eternal. Clara could feel every heartbeat, every breath, the weight of generations pressing down on her shoulders. She could feel the earth beneath her, alive and hungry. "Let's make our own legacy," Jacob breathed, hope igniting in his eyes like a match struck against the darkness. The tension hung thick, electric, as Edgar's expression shifted from anger to something almost human, fear. The land was alive, the ghosts of the past swirling around them in a dance of defiance. And just as the sun dipped below the horizon, swallowing the last light, it became clear, this was not merely a battle of land tenure, it was a war for the very soul of their existence. In the silence that followed, something deep within Clara stirred, an echo from the cosmos that whispered of dreams yet unrealized. She looked at Jacob, then back at Edgar, the weight of their choices pressing down heavier than the evening sky. She could feel it, a shift, a crack in the foundation of the world they knew. And as darkness enveloped them, shadows lengthening, Clara took a breath, ready to step into the unknown, the future unwritten, a canvas waiting for the brush of their defiance. The confrontation loomed like thunder in the distance, a storm brewing on the horizon, waiting to unleash the power dynamics that had shackled them for too long. The land might belong to Edgar, but their spirits were still free, wild, unbroken, and ready to fight. The sun hung low in the sky, a fiery orb threatening to swallow the earth in a crimson haze. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and hay, the kind that clung to your skin, a reminder of both labor and life. I stood there in the barn, heart racing, hands trembling, as the sound of frantic hooves echoed through the wooden structure. Panic, a wild beast clawing at my insides. A loose horse, of all things, galloping like a tempest, a swirling chaos in the midst of our fragile routine. Mara, my sister, darted past me, her wild hair whipping in the wind like the tail of a comet. "Hold on to the gate," she shouted, urgency painting her voice in sharp strokes. I remembered how we used to laugh, the two of us, spinning tales of adventure as the stars flickered above us. But now, in the fading light, the laughter felt so far away, buried under the weight of responsibility. The stakes were high, she was counting on me. The gate creaked as I fought against the rusted latch, my fingers fumbling, clumsy with fear. The horse, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of twilight, snorted and kicked, crashing into the wooden walls of the barn, splinters flying into the air like confetti at a funeral. I could feel the tremors of its panic vibrating through my bones. This wasn't just a horse, it was a reflection of our lives, chaotic and untamed. "Get back!" I cried, but my voice was swallowed by the storm, drowned out by the thundering hooves. I remembered the whispers of my father's lessons, patience, control, but all I felt was the gnawing fear that if I failed this time, it wouldn't just be a horse that would escape, it would be our hopes, our dreams, everything that bound us together in this unforgiving land. Mara's eyes met mine, a flash of understanding passing between us. She was the wild one, full of fire and laughter, but today, that fire was tempered by a sense of urgency that mirrored my own. The weight of our responsibilities pressed down on us, the farm, a living entity, breathing, demanding. The animals, the crops, the land, they all depended on us, and though the soil was our foundation, it was also our prison, shackling us in routines that felt both familiar and suffocating. I lunged for the horse's reins, my heart pounding in rhythm with its frantic movements. I could hear the echoes of our childhood running through the fields, our laughter bathing the landscape in sunlight. But this moment felt different, like a haunting melody turned sour. The horse reared, and for a heartbeat, time froze. I remembered the stories of my mother, the tales of life and death woven into the fabric of this place, how the farm could nurture but also destroy. Mara and I moved in tandem, our bodies a choreography of desperation. We had grown up here, forged in the fires of sweat and toil, yet we were still children in a world that demanded adulthood at an age when we should have been dreaming. I reached for the reins, fingertips brushing against the rough leather, and in that instant, the world narrowed to just the two of us, the pounding heart of the horse, the weight of our sweat-soaked shirts, and the unrelenting grip of responsibility that threatened to crush us. "Now!" Mara screamed, and with a shared breath, we pulled, the horse finally yielding to our combined force. It was a delicate balance, a dance between chaos and control, between what we wanted and what we needed to do. Exhaustion washed over me, but relief came as the animal calmed, its breath slowing. It was over for now, but I could feel the tension lingering, a ghost in the air, reminding us of the reality we face daily. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows that stretched long and ominous across the fields. I looked at Mara, her face streaked with sweat and dirt, and knew, this was our life, raw and unfiltered, a constant battle against the elements, against ourselves. As night cloaked the land, we turned to the house, a flickering light inviting us, yet the darkness whispered secrets we could not ignore. Inside, the familiar scent of wood and earth embraced us, but the silence was heavy, filled with the ghosts of unspoken words. Our parents were gone, leaving us with an inheritance of responsibility that felt both sacred and suffocating. I thought of the mornings that came too quickly, the roosters crowing as if they reveled in our fatigue. The dawn was a cruel master, pulling us from the depths of sleep into the harsh reality of chores and duties. I remembered the feel of cold water splashing against my skin as I washed the dishes, the rhythm of the clock ticking in the background, an incessant reminder that time was never on our side. Each sunrise brought a new urgency. Milking the cows, feeding the chickens, tending to the crops, every task layered with the weight of expectation. Mara and I had become shadows of our parents, echoes of their dreams, but every day felt like a battle against the ghosts that haunted these walls. The weight of our responsibilities twisted in my chest, a constant reminder of our isolation, the silence punctuated only by the rustling of the wind, a cruel joke against the backdrop of our relentless toil. As I climbed into bed that night, the sheets cool against my skin, sleep eluded me. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows dancing like memories, fading, altering, and yet always there. I remembered our childhood dreams, how we believed that something greater awaited us beyond the horizon, yet here we were, bound to the earth in a cycle of toil and longing. Mara's soft voice broke the silence. Do you think we're stuck here forever? Her question hung in the air, a fragile thing, and I turned, meeting her gaze. The intensity of her eyes pierced through the darkness. I don't know, I whispered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue, but we have to keep going. For us. For this place. In that moment, we were united by more than blood, we were bound by the shared weight of our existence, the shared fear of the unknown that lurked beyond our farm. The stars outside twinkled like distant promises, mocking us with the grandeur of a world we could not touch. As I closed my eyes, I felt the pull of the land beneath me, the promise of tomorrow, and the haunting uncertainty of what it would bring. Outside, the wind howled, a reminder that life continued, relentless, unyielding, as we drifted into a restless sleep, dreams swirling like shadows, echoing the chaos that was our daily life on the farm. The sun breaks over the horizon, a molten gold that spills across the fields, igniting the dew-drenched blades of grass. It is a moment suspended in time, yet it is the harbinger of chaos. I stand there, breath hitching, the old tractor looms like a beast from the past, rusting but defiant, its engine an angry heart that rumbles in protest. The earth below me trembles under the weight of a storm that has been brewing for days, heavy clouds swirling above, teasing rain that feels like a promise yet to be fulfilled. I remember the way the wind whispers through the cornfields at dawn, a song that lulls me into a false sense of security. But this morning, the whisper feels like a warning. My heart aches as I think of Mara, my wife, her face etched with worry, her hands trembling as she clutched the worn-out quilt, a relic of happier days. She'd stayed up late again, waiting for me to come back from the fields. I can still see her silhouette against the kitchen window, the soft glow of the oil lamp illuminating her frown like a lighthouse lost in a tempest. I climb onto the tractor, that old hunk of metal that has seen better days, and feel a strange kinship with it, both of us on borrowed time, both of us creaking under the weight of responsibilities. The engine sputters, coughs, and roars to life, but the noise is like a scream echoing through my soul. A moment of peace punctured by the reality of what I have to do. Each row of crops needs tending, fingers deep in the dark, rich soil that both nourishes and binds me. I kneel in the mud, the earth cool and welcoming, yet I am reminded of the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. I remember the stories my father told me of droughts and floods, of seasons that came and went like ghostly figures dancing in the twilight. The land is merciless, a fickle partner that can shift from bounty to ruin in the blink of an eye. I glance up, and the clouds loom heavier now, pregnant with rain. Mara's voice echoes in my mind, a haunting reminder. You have to be careful, Jacob. It's not just the land you're fighting against. She sees the danger I can't, the shadows lurking behind every blade of grass, every rustle in the wind. I feel the tension in my muscles, tightening like the noose of doubt. The rain bursts forth suddenly, sheets of cold that lash against my skin. I throw myself into the work, but each droplet feels like a dagger, each gust of wind a warning. I push against the storm, tilling the soil as if the act could stave off the catastrophe I feel approaching. The ground is slippery beneath me and my hands claw at it, but it pulls back, as if even the earth senses the turmoil. I remember how it used to be, how the sun would kiss the land, coaxing forth life like a gentle lover. Now, it feels like a betrayal, with each raindrop a reminder that nothing is guaranteed. I wipe the sweat mixed with rain from my brow and find myself racing against time, the storm growing ever more malicious. I can't shake the feeling of eyes on me. I glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see Mara standing there, arms folded, a skeptical eyebrow raised. But no, it's just the crows, dark figures silhouetted against the roiling sky, cawing as if they are mocking my futile efforts. I've often thought of them as harbingers. Today, they feel like an audience waiting for a tragedy to unfold. Panic flares within me as I rush to the barn, the wind howling like a banshee, tearing at my resolve. Each step is a battle against the elements, against the ghosts of past failures that claw at my heart. Inside, the animals stir restlessly, they can sense the storm brewing, their instincts sharper than mine. I manage to calm the sheep, my fingers running over their woolly backs, feeling their warmth against my cold palms. They are innocent, oblivious to the world outside. But the tranquility shatters when I hear the crash. The barn door slams shut with a deafening bang, as if announcing the arrival of fate itself. I whirl around to see the rain seep through the cracks, pooling ominously on the ground. My breath quickens. This is it. This is the moment I've dreaded. I push through the chaos, fighting against the wind, the storm a maelstrom of fury. The crops, the very essence of our survival, are in peril. I leap back outside, the rain slicing my face like icy blades. The fields, once a vibrant patchwork of green and gold, morph into a dark, churning sea. I can see the roots of my labor being pulled from their home, the earth giving way, and with it, my heart sinks. In that moment, I remember my promise to Mara. I should have taken her hand, pulled her into the fields with me, let her feel the pulse of the land. Now, the rain is a torrent, drowning out all reason. I scream into the storm, a raw, primal sound that echoes back at me, a desperate plea to the universe. The shadows twist and turn around me, and as I race through the rain, I feel the weight of every decision I've made crashing down, each drop of water a memory of hope, love, anguish, a cycle that never ends. I am raw, exposed, and utterly alive in this torment, for even in despair, there is a strange beauty that pulls me deeper into the maw of the storm. The clouds churn above, dark and menacing, but as I stare into their depths, I see it, the flash of lightning, a bright scar that cuts through the darkness. And I know that in this relentless struggle against nature, against fate, against my own fears, it's not just the crops that hang in the balance. It's everything. I remember the sound of laughter as we danced in the fields, the soft brush of her hand against mine. I remember, and the storm rages on, relentless, an unforgiving symphony that echoes through my heart and soul. The thunder rolled across the sky like a restless beast, dark clouds gathering as if nature itself was holding its breath. I stood in the field, the soil beneath my fingers damp and cold, each grain whispering secrets of the past, a past filled with toil, struggle, and fleeting triumphs. The wind howled, pulling at my clothes and tugging at my heart, reminding me of the choices I'd made, the ones that had led me here, standing on the brink of ruin, yet again. I remember the first time I wielded a hoe, the wooden handle rough against my palm. The blade, glinting with the promise of work to be done, sank deep into the soil, a promise of life, of harvest, of sustenance. But that promise hung like a noose around my neck now, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down, a reminder of what was at stake. My father's voice echoed in my mind, a spectre of regret and stubborn pride. The land gives, but it also takes. Be wary. Mama, I called into the wind, searching for her in the solitude of the fields. She was out there somewhere, tending to the fragile plants, the lifeblood of our existence, her hands carving a softer path in the earth. But as the storm brewed above, I feared the worst. The rain would come like a hammer, the crops would drown, and all that we had fought for would slip through our fingers like sand. Across the field, Jacob stood, a silhouette against the darkening sky. His brow was furrowed, a permanent line etched on his forehead that spoke of 1,000 sleepless nights, of drought and pestilence, of families torn apart by famine. He was my brother, my anchor, yet he felt like a stranger in moments like these. "We need to replant," he shouted, urgency lacing his words, but I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Our hearts were heavy with the weight of decisions, with unspoken fears hanging between us like a thunderstorm ready to break. "I remember when we would laugh in these fields," I said, the memories crashing over me. "When the sun kissed the earth, and the harvests were bountiful. How did we lose that?" He turned to me, his face a mask of determination and despair. "We didn't lose it. We fought for it, and we'll fight again. But we have to use every tool, every technique we have. His words, like daggers, pierced through the thick fog of my doubt, igniting a flicker of hope. But was hope enough? In a world that felt like it was crumbling, could we truly wield the tools of our ancestors to carve a new path, or were we simply tilting at windmills? The memory of the plough flashed in my mind, a beast of iron and wood, its teeth biting deep into the earth, turning it over, exposing the richness buried beneath. We must wean the land off its old ways, Jacob urged. The times are changing. Innovation is not a sin. The way we farm is our identity. I interrupted, my voice sharp as the edge of a scythe. You think just by adopting new techniques we can erase generations of toil? You think that a shiny new tool can replace our blood and sweat? Our ancestors would roll in their graves. The wind howled louder, as if in agreement with my fury, and the sky cracked open, pouring down rain like 1,000 arrows, piercing the ground. I felt the first drops hit my skin, a cold reminder of the coming storm. In the distance, I could hear the faint echo of thunder, a promise of chaos. My mother's voice rang in my ears, soothing yet haunting, reminding me of the old ways, the methods that had anchored our family for generations. I remembered the wooden spade, worn and splintered, handed down from father to son, each mark telling a story of harvests, of failures, of nights spent under the stars dreaming of better days. I remembered how we would gather around the fire, recounting tales of the seasons, our hearts intertwined with the rhythm of the land. But now, that rhythm was faltering, disrupted by the discord of modernity and uncertainty. We can't cling to the past, sis, Jacob said, his voice stronger now, cutting through the storm. We need to embrace crop rotation, diversifying what we plant. We need to enrich the soil with composting, with the very waste of life that sustains us. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Could we truly adapt? Or would we be swallowed whole by the relentless tide of change? I felt my pulse quickening, the intensity of our struggle ebbing and flowing like the waves, a surge of raw emotion flooding through me. The power of the land was intoxicating, but it was also terrifying. It held the keys to our survival, but at what cost? I watched as the rain fell, each droplet a reminder of what could be lost. I thought of the tools strewn across the barn floor, the rusty shears, the shattered wheelbarrow, the hoe that had seen better days. A part of me wanted to scream at the injustice of it all, at the futility of fighting against the changing tide. But another part, the stubborn part, argued back. The tools were not just instruments, they were a testament to our survival, to our resilience. And so I grabbed the hoe, feeling the familiar weight in my hands, the cold metal glimmering in the dim light. I swung it down into the earth, one stroke at a time, my heart pounding, thunder rumbling in the distance. The storm was growing closer, and with each movement, I could feel the pulse of the land beneath my feet, like the heartbeat of some ancient creature rising to meet the chaos above. For every swing, every thrust into the soil, I felt the tension build, the confrontation of past and future, of tradition and innovation. The storm raged on, but in that moment, it felt like a dance, an embrace of old and new, a fraying thread that refused to snap. As I turned the earth, I could see my mother's face in the clouds, hear my father's laughter echoing in the thunder. This was it, the moment of reckoning, of revelation. Jacob! I shouted through the tempest, maybe we can forge a path forward together, blend the old with the new. We can't forsake the past or fear the future. We can harvest hope from the soil we till. In that moment, with the rain soaking through my clothes and the wind fierce around me, we became the tools of our destiny. We were not merely farmers, we were warriors in a battle against the elements, against the fear of failure. And as the storm finally broke, unleashing its fury upon our heads, we stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next, fully aware that the methods of our labor would shape the future we craved. The earth beneath us heaved, alive with possibilities, urging us to dig deeper. The land lay still, a haunting canvas of grey and brown, the air thick with the echoes of muted cries and the sharp tang of impending rain. I remember the day as shadows danced on the horizon, the sun a reluctant guest slipping behind the clouds. There he stood, Thomas, his calloused hands gripping the plough as if it were a lifeline, the wooden handles worn smooth by the weight of his burdens. An anxious glimmer filled his eyes, reflecting the struggles of a man tethered to the whims of nature, the sky, a mercurial beast, ready to unleash fury upon his modest patch of earth. "Do you hear it?" he whispered, his voice trembling like the first stirrings of a storm. I strained to catch the sound, but only silence answered, a silence so thick it felt like a shroud. He tugged at the plough, a crude tool fashioned from sturdy timber, sharpened iron at the tip, his lifeblood, his connection to the soil. Each furrow he carved was a prayer, a hope mingling with the dirt, but hope was a fickle friend, and the harvest was an unyielding mistress. Then there was Eleanor, crouched beside the patch of beans, her fingers digging into the earth, searching for what little sustenance she could coax from the stubborn ground. Her heart was a tempest, a fierce woman bound to this life yet yearning for the freedom of the distant hills. "Every seed is a promise," she would say, but often, in the quiet moments, I saw the doubt creep into her gaze, like vines choking a sapling. "What if the dreams wither on the vine?" she would wonder, casting her eyes to the sky as if to catch the answers hidden in the swirling clouds. She remembered the stories her mother told her of great feasts and bountiful harvests, tales that felt like myths more than memories. Her hands moved with desperation, planting the tiny seeds, each one a fragile embodiment of the hope she clung to, even as she felt the weight of despair squeezing her chest, suffocating her spirit. "Plant, pray, repeat," she murmured, an incantation to ward off the ghosts of failure lurking in the shadows of the fields. And in the distance, the ominous thrum of the wind whispered foreboding secrets, hints of a coming storm that would drown the fragile seedlings before they had a chance to rise. The scythe, glinting menacingly in a patch of sunlight, awaited the harvest, its blade a reminder of the duality of life and death. It could reap joy or despair in equal measure, cutting through the bonds of hope like a knife through flesh. But every swing of that scythe was more than just an act of gathering, it was a ritual steeped in sweat and sacrifice. Thomas, fierce and relentless, wielded it with a primal intensity, each arc of the blade telling a story, a symphony of loss and labor under the watchful eye of the heavens. "We are all but ghosts in this field," he would often say, haunting the soil for what little we can claim. The ground was unforgiving, and yet it was alive, pulsating with the breath of centuries, a living tapestry woven with the threads of anguish and aspiration. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the earth, I remember the moment the sky cracked open, drenching us in a downpour. The chaos of thunder mirrored the tempest in our hearts. We fought against it, racing to gather the tools, sickles, rakes, and those rudimentary wooden ploughs, each a testament to our struggle against the elements. We battled not just the storm but our own frailties, the vulnerability that seeped through our fingers like the very soil we tilled. "Can you feel it?" Eleanor shouted over the cacophony, her hair plastered to her face, eyes sparkling with defiance. She was alive in that moment, a warrior forged by conflict, her spirit unyielding as the storm raged on around us. "We will not be crushed." But beneath her fierce exterior lay the spectre of fear, the knowledge that nature was a capricious god, blessing one moment, cursing the next. The rain pelted down, merciless, the world around us becoming a tempestuous blur as we fought against the torrent. I could see the battle waging in her heart, the tumultuous waves of hope and despair crashing against one another. Her resolve was a fragile ember against the storm. We worked side by side, the mud clinging to our feet, a sticky reminder of our connection to this land, this life. Hand over hand, we pulled the plough through the muck, our bodies straining against the weight of history, of generations who had come before us. Each thrust was a rebellion, a declaration that we were here, alive and breathing, even as the spectre of famine loomed large on the horizon. Days turned to weeks, and yet the struggle never ceased. The tools we wielded became extensions of ourselves, those crude ploughs, the rakes that scraped against the earth, the sickles that glimmered with promise. Each one held a history of pain and perseverance, echoes of our laughter and tears embedded in the very fibers of their being. "Remember," Thomas would whisper during the quiet moments, his voice a low rumble against the backdrop of rustling leaves. "We are not just farmers, we are guardians of the earth." His heart was heavy with the weight of those words, and yet they also kindled a fire within us. The bond we shared was unbreakable, forged by the trials we faced together, pushing against time and nature's relentless grip. And as the harvest drew near, the air thickened with anticipation, the ripe grain swaying like dancers in the wind, each stalk a testament to our toil. But looming in the distance, a shadow hung, an uninvited spectre threatening to snatch away our dreams. Would we reap a bountiful harvest, or would the gods of fate deal us a cruel hand? The scythe glinted again in the fading light, a promise and a threat entwined, as we prepared for the confrontation that awaited us in the fields. Our hearts beat in sync with the rhythm of the earth, a primal dance played out under the watchful gaze of the cosmos, where time stretched and twisted like the vines we tended. And so, we stood on the precipice, breathless, the story unfurling before us, the weight of our lives caught in the balance. The cycle of life continued, relentless and fierce, leading us deeper into the embrace of the unknown, where the heart of the land pulsed with the echoes of hope and despair. The storm was not just in the skies, it raged within us, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who dared to till the soil, even when the shadows closed in. The sky was bruised, a swirling mass of dark clouds pregnant with unspoken fury. The wind howled through the fields, and I stood there, heart pounding, eyes locked on the trembling stalks of corn, their tips quivering under the weight of an imminent storm. I remember thinking, this is how it begins. The earth, our lifeblood, could turn monstrous in a heartbeat, and all our labor could be swallowed whole. The chill in the air was a ghost whispering warnings in my ear, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wicked stirred beneath the surface, just waiting to erupt. There was Mary, her hands calloused and stained with the dirt of the land, the weight of her family's heritage etched into every furrow of her brow. She didn't just cultivate crops, she cultivated hope, even when despair lurked in the shadows like a hawk poised to swoop down. But now, with the storm brewing, her dreams felt as fragile as the tendrils of smoke curling upward from a dying fire. "We should have planted earlier," she muttered, her voice barely louder than the approaching thunder. I remember when my mother taught me the rhythms of the earth, how the seasons don't wait for anyone. And I could see it in her eyes, the flickering flame of doubt battling against the fierce hope that had sustained her through every drought and flood. Then there was Samuel, the land's reluctant guardian, his stubborn pride as much a part of him as the dirt under his nails. I watched him pace, fists clenched, as if he could will the storm away. Each step echoed with the weight of his father's expectations, heavy as the oppressive sky above us. "The seeds are in the ground," he barked, defiance coursing through him, "and God help us if they wash away. We've worked too hard for this." The words hung there, thick with desperation, because deep down, Samuel knew, every inch of that soil told a story, but storms didn't care about stories. They came like a thief in the night, stealing dreams, and leaving nothing but despair in their wake. The first drops hit the ground, splattering against the earth with a sound that echoed like a death knell. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, palpable and intense, each beat of rain against the soil like a drum roll for calamity. I remember the way Mary's breath caught in her throat, the desperation clawing at her as she grasped Samuel's arm. "What if we lose it all?" she whispered, the fear wrapping around her like a shroud. Her vulnerability seeped into me, an ache that threatened to swallow us whole, a reminder of how fragile our existence was, how close we danced to the edge of oblivion. The storm unleashed its fury, a cacophony of wind and rain that roared like a beast awakened from slumber. I stood there, watching as the landscape transformed into a wild, chaotic dance of nature's wrath. The crops bowed low, as if pleading for mercy, and I felt a primal urge to scream into the tempest, to shout against the enormity of it all. "Hold on!" I wanted to yell, but the storm drowned out my voice, just as it threatened to drown out our hopes. I watched Mary and Samuel, their faces lit by the brief flashes of lightning, illuminated not just by the storm but by the raw intensity of their shared fear. "Remember the rituals?" Samuel shouted above the roar, his voice hoarse, a desperate attempt to cling to tradition. "The prayers to the spirits of the land? They have to hear us." He was grasping at straws, clutching tightly to the remnants of faith. Mary nodded, her eyes wide with fear, and together they began to chant, their voices rising above the chaos like a lifeline thrown into a churning sea. "Spirits of the earth, hear us. Take mercy." Their words were a fragile thread connecting them to generations past. Their ancestors had faced storms, too. But would it be enough? I felt the weight of history, the longing for something beyond mere survival. But as the storm raged, I felt the ground beneath us, a heartbeat of its own, thrumming with life, with all the anger and despair of those who had come before. The land was alive, and it was a wild thing, untamed and forever beyond our grasp. The water pooled at our feet, a murky reflection of our fears. I could see it in their eyes, the flicker of desperation morphing into something darker, something primal. What if nature turned against us? What if the land we'd nurtured became our grave? I felt the chill creep into my bones, a whisper of ancient truths that thrummed just beneath the surface. And in that moment, amid the chaos, I remembered the tales. They spoke of sacrifices made, of blood spilled on the earth to appease the spirits. I dared to glance at Mary and Samuel, their faces streaked with rain, haunted by their own ghosts. How far would we go to save what we cherished? What rituals lay ahead that we had yet to uncover? The storm crescendoed, a symphony of chaos and fear, and I was lost in the tumult. Time twisted, moments stretching and collapsing, memories flickering like shadows against the raging storm. I felt the pulse of the earth beneath my feet, an echo of 1,000 prayers offered in desperation, of countless hearts beating in rhythm with the land. I was swept up in the urgency, the fear, the raw need to survive as the storm threatened to swallow us whole. But in the eye of the tempest, there was still that flicker of hope, a fragile, tenuous thread that held us together. We were bound by the earth, by the rituals that intertwined our fates, and even as the storm raged around us, I felt the fire of resilience burning deep within. This was our life, our land, and no storm would take it from us without a fight. The rain continued to fall, relentless and unforgiving, but I knew that soon, the clouds would part, revealing the dawn. The land, bruised but not broken, would rise again, and so would we. The fields lay in eerie stillness, a shroud of uncertainty cloaking the horizon. I remember the way the sun trembled behind a curtain of darkening clouds, an anxious breath held in the sky. The air was thick, pregnant with the promise of rain, but also, perhaps, with something more sinister. It was the kind of quiet that felt like a warning, a coiled serpent ready to strike. My hands trembled as I gripped the worn wooden fence, a splinter biting into my palm. I could hear the distant echoes of my father's laughter, how it used to dance with the breeze as we planted seeds, hope blooming with each turn of the soil. Hope, a fragile thing, was all but whispering now. Then there was Clara, the heart of our operation, her spirit a wildflower in a storm. She stood at the edge of the cornfield, arms crossed, her brow furrowed in defiance against the gathering darkness. "This isn't just soil, Jacob," she shouted, her voice straining against the weight of the clouds. "It's our future. We can't let it drown beneath the weight of despair." Her eyes sparkled with fierce determination, but I could see the cracks, the fear that gnawed at her heart. Each storm brought with it the specter of failure, a haunting presence that slipped into her dreams, wrapping around her throat like creeping vines. I wanted to tell her that I felt it too, the suffocating grip of anxiety that wrapped around my chest. "I remember," I whispered, the words almost lost to the wind. "I remember when we thought the rain would only make us grow." The memories churned within me, a tempest of color and sound, laughter and joy, now eclipsed by the grim reality of drought and disease. Each season had become a battle, a relentless fight against the elements and the creeping despair that settled like dust on our tongues. Days turned into a blur of sweat and toil. The sun, once a warm friend, now scorched the earth in an unforgiving embrace. We toiled for hours, our backs bent low, our bodies echoing the rhythm of the land. I could see the way the soil crumbled underfoot, like fragile dreams slipping through our fingers. "What good is a harvest if it's just dust?" I would mutter, and Clara would shoot me that look, half fierce, half broken. She was a warrior, but even warriors falter, even they fear the darkness that lurks behind the harvest moon. And then, when the clouds finally unleashed their fury, bringing torrents of rain that threatened to drown our hopes, I found myself standing in the middle of the field, soaked to the skin. The water pooled around me, cascading like a river of despair. I could hear the croaking of frogs, a symphony of sorrow, an ode to dreams washed away. Clara was beside me, her voice rising above the storm, a beacon in the chaos. "We fight! We fight for every seed, every blade of grass." But it wasn't just the weather, it was the whispers from the town, too. The murmurs of doubt, the glances of pity. They say we're cursed, I heard someone say over the crackling radio, the words dripping like poison. Just another family destined for ruin. I felt the weight of their eyes, the judgment looming like dark clouds. Each look was a shadow that crept closer, devouring the light of our resolve. I remember the night when Clara's laughter turned to tears. The moon hung like a ghost in the sky, a pale witness to our despair. "What if we lose it all, Jacob?" she asked, her voice cracking like the dry earth. "What if this is it?" I wanted to reach for her, to promise her the world would turn in our favor, that fate would be kind, but all I could do was watch as she crumbled beneath the weight of her fears. "Look at us," I said, the bitterness seeping into my words. "We're mere shadows of what we once were. We're not farmers, we're survivors." Yet, in the darkest moments, there was also a glimmer. The way the sun fought its way through the clouds, lighting up the drenched earth like it was a canvas. I remember the taste of rain on my lips, the electric buzz of hope amid despair. Clara, with muddy hands and a fierce heart, would dance in the downpour, her laughter ringing like bells. "This is just a moment," she would say, her faith unyielding. Moments pass. But moments have a way of stretching, don't they? They linger like ghosts, asking us to confront them. I saw her struggle to breathe in the wake of each failed season, her dreams floundering like fish out of water. And yet, every time the soil sighed, every time the winds whispered through the fields, Clara would still find a way to rise again. "We will plant again, Jacob. We are not defeated," she would declare, though I could see the weariness etching lines on her face. The clock ticked on, its relentless hands marking time like a metronome to our despair. The shadows of our past grew long, cast by the flickering light of hope. I remember standing there, feeling the earth beneath my feet, its pulse echoing the rhythm of our lives, a constant reminder that even in darkness, life fought to persist. The roots of our struggles ran deep, entwined with the fibers of our souls. And with each heartbeat, the tension thickened. As the storm clouds gathered once more on the horizon, I felt it, a charge in the air, an electric hunger for change. Clara took my hand, her grip fierce, unyielding. "Whatever comes, we will face it together," she said, and in that moment, I knew the fight was far from over. As the first raindrop fell, a solitary tear from the sky, I felt the world shift beneath me, the promise of new beginnings mingling with the weight of our fears. The earth trembled, anticipation hanging in the air like incense, thick with the scent of possibility. The shadows loomed, but we had each other, and in that tangled dance of hope and despair, it was enough to keep us standing. For the storm was coming, and we would not face it alone. The storm swept in like a predator, clouds roiling and darkening the sky, casting an ominous shadow over the farm as the wind howled like a banshee. Raindrops, heavy as stones, pelted the parched earth, stirring up the scent of wet soil and fear. I stood in the barn, heart racing, the echoes of frantic bleating scratching at the edges of my sanity. My sheep, were spooked, their wide eyes reflecting the chaos outside, and in that moment, it felt like the world was spiraling out of control. I remember when I first brought them home, each one a ball of fluff and life, innocent and trusting. There was Lila, a curious little ewe with a wild tuft of wool that stuck up like a crown, and then there was Gus, the stubborn ram who would butt heads with anything that dared enter his space. But now, as thunder cracked overhead, it was not the memories that gripped me, it was the sheer terror of losing them. Panic clawed at my throat like a rabid animal, desperate to escape. Eli, the pain in my heart, the laughter that echoed in my mind, stood beside me, drenched and frantic. His hands trembled as he fumbled to secure the barn door, the wood creaking in protest. "We can't let them out," he shouted over the roar of the storm, fear etched on his face. "They'll stampede." He couldn't finish the thought. I could see it in his eyes, the weight of responsibility, the fear of loss. He had been my anchor, my confidant, a flawed hero who wore his heart on his sleeve, his love for the animals as raw as the scars on his hands. "Eli," I whispered, but the words felt heavy, like stones pressing down on my chest. I wanted to assure him, to tell him that we would save them, that together we were invincible. Yet, doubt knotted in my gut. What if we failed? What if the storm took everything from us, our dreams, our hopes, leaving behind nothing but shadows and silence? A distant howl, a creature calling out, something sinister lurking in the darkness. I could feel it, the fear wrapping around my throat, squeezing tighter. I remembered the stories my grandfather told me, how the wolves prowled the edges of the fields, drawn by the scent of vulnerability. The thought sent chills skittering down my spine. They can smell fear, he'd said with a laugh, but there was truth in his voice, a stark reminder that animals could sense the tremors of our souls. I glanced at Lila, the way her little body pressed against the wooden slats, seeking comfort, seeking me. It was the same way I had felt as a child, searching for solace in the embrace of my mother, her warmth a shield against the harshness of the world. "We have to calm them," I said, my voice a fragile thread. But how could I calm them when I was hollow inside, an echo of the person I once was? As the storm raged on, I remembered the day Eli and I had decided to make this farm our home. It had felt monumental, as if the universe had aligned perfectly, giving us this chance to create something beautiful. The flickering lights of the city had faded into the background, replaced by constellations of stars that whispered promises of peace. But now, beneath the tempest, those promises felt like smoke, dissipating into the air, leaving only the bitter taste of regret on my tongue. "Do you remember the first time we sheared them?" Eli asked suddenly, a smile breaking through the storm clouds of his expression. "You got so lost in the fluff, I thought you'd never come out." The way his eyes sparkled, even in the chaos, brought warmth to my heart. But there was a sadness behind that laughter, a shadow that loomed larger with each passing day. He carried the weight of unspoken fears, the guilt of past decisions that gnawed at him, and I felt it all, the tension, the yearning, the love that was tangled with despair. "I remember," I replied, the words catching in my throat, filled with memories of laughter and light. "But what if this storm takes them away?" The thought twisted like a knife, piercing through any remaining joy. We were at the mercy of the elements, our lives hinging on the whims of nature, the uncertainty that taunted us cruelly. The wind howled outside, a banshee's wail that sent chills racing down my spine, and just then, I heard it, a sudden crash, the unmistakable sound of wood splintering. The barn door buckled under the pressure, and panic surged like wildfire. "Gus!" I shouted, sprinting towards the noise, heart pounding in my chest. The storm was relentless, each raindrop like a harsh reminder of everything I had to lose. He was there, caught in the doorway, thrashing wildly, eyes wild with fear. I leaped forward, my heart pounding like a war drum, my hands grasping for his woolly coat. "Hold on, buddy, hold on!" I gasped, pulling him in, feeling the warmth of his body against mine. Eli was at my side, his hands working furiously, helping me guide Gus back to safety. The chaos seemed to fade, the world narrowing to this moment of desperation and connection, breathing life into the storm's shadows. And then it hit me, the importance of these animals, of their lives intertwined with ours. They were not just livestock, they were companions, a lifeline to our humanity. They carried our joys, our burdens, and in their eyes, I saw reflections of our own struggles. Lila nudged my leg, seeking comfort, and I knelt down to her, fingers brushing through her wool, grounding me amidst the turmoil. The storm would rage on. There would be more challenges, more losses, and heart-wrenching moments that would test the very fabric of who we were. But as I looked at Eli, the flicker of hope igniting in his gaze, I realized that through it all, we would fight. For the animals, for ourselves, for the love that pulsed with every heartbeat. Time crept forward, a dance of shadows and light, as we stood together, bound by the storm, wrapped in the wild embrace of life and loss. The barn creaked, the storm howled, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. The importance of animals was not just in their labor, but in the way they linked us to something greater, a reminder of love, of heart, and of the fierce, unyielding spirit that refuses to surrender in the face of darkness. The wind howled through the cracks in the barn, a mournful sound that caught in my throat like a scream left unshouted. The smell of damp hay mingled with the earthy musk of livestock, a pungent reminder of life's unyielding cycle. I stood there, feet planted on the rotting wooden floor, heart racing, as I surveyed the chaos. The cows shuffled nervously, their eyes wide and glistening in the dim light, each one a mirror to my own fear. The air was electric, thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of the world pressing down, a suffocating blanket of responsibility. I remember the day we brought home Daisy, the heifer with the gentle brown eyes. I was so naive, so hopeful. I thought she would be a savior, a bright spot in our struggling farm. But hope can be a cruel mistress, a thief of clarity. In those early days, I watched her frolic through the fields, legs kicking high like a child's in play, and I thought, here is life. But life is often a cruel joke, a dance of fate that leaves us gasping, yearning for answers we'll never find. Then there was James, my brother, burdened with the weight of tradition and expectation, his hands calloused from years of toil. We've got to breed her right, he said, eyes narrow with determination. The bloodline matters. But what of the heart? What of the spark that ignites passion? Each decision, each breeding plan, a gamble against the very essence of life, and I often wondered if we were playing God or simply hastening our own ruin. It was a critical night, a night that felt more like a funeral than a celebration. The barn buzzed with tension, Daisy was due, and the countdown had begun. I could hear the low moans of the cows, a symphony of anxiety that crescendoed into a cacophony as labor began. My hands trembled, slick with sweat and fear. James barked orders, but his voice was lost in the storm of my thoughts. What if she doesn't make it? What if we fail her? I felt the desperation clawing at my throat, threatening to choke me. The first cries of life shattered the air, raw and primal. I pressed my palms against the cool wood, feeling each jolt of panic radiate through my body. Daisy pushed and grunted, the effort a testament to her spirit, and I found myself frozen between admiration and fear. "Come on, girl," I whispered, though she wouldn't hear me over the chaos. The world outside faded, the sun a fading ember, while within the barn shadows danced, mocking our uncertainty. And there it was, a calf, slick and trembling, emerging into the world, a moment both beautiful and terrifying. But beauty is often intertwined with pain, a cruel reminder of how fragile life truly is. As the calf took its first breath, I saw James' face pale. "It's not right," he muttered, his breath hitching. The calf's legs buckled, and I felt a cold rush of dread. Is it sick? The question hung in the air, a ghost haunting the joy of new life. The clock ticked on, an insistent reminder that time waits for no one, not even in the sacred space of birth. We gathered close, hearts pounding in unison, as Daisy licked her newborn, a mother's instinct palpable and fierce. Yet the shadow of doubt loomed large over us. Each breath the calf took was a battle, and I felt it deep within my bones. What if we've bred her wrong? My voice trembled, a whisper swallowed by the night. James clenched his jaw, the weight of generations pressing down. We can't fail. We mustn't. A mantra steeped in desperation. But what if failure was already woven into our very fabric? With each passing minute, my heart sank deeper, the tension unbearable, a taut string ready to snap. I could feel despair creeping in, cold and consuming, like the dark underbelly of the night itself. As the hours dragged on, the barn became a crucible of emotion. I looked at Daisy, her eyes wild, filled with a fight I couldn't comprehend. The cow was a warrior, and I realized then, in that swirling void of uncertainty, we were all fighting, Daisy, James, the calf. We were locked in a brutal ballet, an intricate dance of life and death, of hope and despair, with each heartbeat a reminder of the stakes. I remember glancing at the clock, its hands moving with agonizing slowness. Time is not our friend. I could almost hear the clock laughing at us, mocking our efforts with every tick. The shadows stretched and yawned, as if the very barn was alive, breathing with the weight of our struggle. We hovered on the precipice of despair, each moment a reminder of our vulnerability. Suddenly, the air shifted. A powerful cry pierced the silence, echoing off the walls. It was a sound of life, a rush of primal energy that pulled us back from the edge. I felt my heart leap, a flicker of hope igniting in the darkness. The calf stood, wobbly but resolute, and Daisy nuzzled it with a tenderness that shattered my fears. "Look at her," I gasped, tears blurring my vision. "She's alive." James let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding, his shoulders relaxing just a fraction. The relief washed over us like rain on parched earth, but even in that moment of triumph, the undercurrent of anxiety remained. How long would this joy last? What hidden challenges lay ahead? In the back of my mind, I felt the looming shadows, disease, market prices, the ever-looming threat of drought. The enormity of our choices weighed heavily. How could we ensure this little life would thrive? And yet, even amid the swirling chaos, there was beauty. The bond between mother and calf, raw and unfiltered, reminded me of the strength we all carry, the sheer will to survive against the odds. But survival is never simple. The world is a cruel teacher. We faced our own demons, the weight of expectation crushing, gnawing at the edges of our hearts. I felt the pull of despair lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness. And as I looked into James' eyes, I saw my own fears reflected back, both of us caught in a storm we didn't know how to navigate. As the night deepened, I understood that life on the farm was an endless cycle of hope and heartbreak. The challenges of care and breeding were only part of the story, a narrative woven into the very fabric of our existence. Each decision, each birth, a fragile thread connecting us to the past, the future, and the land we tilled with love and sweat. The shadows whispered secrets, promises, and threats, leaving me with an unsettling sense that this moment was just a pause, a breath before the next wave crashed over us. In this intricate dance of life, we found ourselves caught in the rhythm, struggling to hold on, to care, to breed, to live. And as the barn settled into a fragile calm, I knew the story was far from over. Chapter 17, 9. Harvest time, the struggles and rewards The air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating, as the sun sank low behind the hills, splattering the sky with streaks of crimson and gold. The fields lay barren, but they trembled, anticipating the fierce grip of night. I stood there, in the heart of despair, watching as the shadows of the past danced upon the land where dreams once flourished. The harvest had come, but not a single ear of corn glistened with promise. Instead, a gnawing emptiness lingered, echoing like the hollow thud of a heart that feared it might never beat again. I remember the smell of earth just after the rain, the way it promised life, but this was different. This was a funeral for hope. My fingers itched, stained with the black soil of desperation, every grain a reminder of what had been lost. The weight of 1,000 thoughts bore down upon me as I glanced at Eliza, standing just a few paces away, her hands clenched at her sides, her face a mask of fierce determination barely concealing the devastation within. Her once bright eyes, now dimmed by worry, reflected a future painted in shades of despair. "Do you see it?" she whispered, her voice trembling like the leaves rustling in the wind. "Do you see what's become of us?" I turned my gaze to the remnants of our dreams, the twisted stalks of what should have been a bountiful harvest. "I see it," I replied, my voice barely rising above the whisper of the setting sun. "I see it all." Then there was James, my closest friend, pacing like a caged animal, the weight of the world on his shoulders. His fists were clenched, the knuckles white with anger and fear. "We can't give up," he spat, frustration lacing his words like bitter wine. "We'll find a way. We fought too long to let this land swallow us whole." I wanted to believe him, to grasp onto his fervor like a lifeline, but the truth sank deeper like a stone thrown into still water, rippling outwards with each passing second. What good were our dreams if the earth itself had turned her back on us? I glanced back at Eliza, her breath coming faster, a storm brewing in her chest, and I felt the crack of something fragile within us, a relationship, a bond built on shared laughter and whispered secrets. Now, it threatened to shatter under the weight of our shared fears. But there was no time for sentimentality, not now. We needed to act, to cling to the threads of hope woven into the fabric of our lives. With every passing moment, the shadows grew longer, threatening to consume us. "We have to gather what we can," I said, urgency flooding my veins like ice water. "If we don't, there'll be nothing left to harvest, nothing left at all." The panic in Eliza's eyes shot through me, I had seen that look before. It haunted me, a ghost of moments long past when we had stood on the precipice of disaster before. I remembered her laughter, the way it had felt like sunlight breaking through a storm cloud. Where had it gone? As we bent down to sift through the remnants of our once thriving crops, I could feel the desperation wrapping around us like the vines that used to stretch toward the sky, now withered and broken. Each handful of dirt was a reminder of dreams dashed against the cruel rocks of fate. I could taste the grit on my tongue, salty and bitter like tears unshed. "Look!" James's voice pierced through the thickening gloom. He held up a single ear of corn, its golden kernels shining defiantly against the encroaching darkness. "It's not over." "Not yet." Eliza's breath hitched, and I felt her hope flicker back to life like a dying flame caught by a sudden gust of wind. But I was not convinced. "One ear won't save us," I said, the words heavy as stones. "We need more, much more." And yet, beneath the weight of my doubt, something began to shift within the air around us. I could feel it, a whisper of possibility, a soft pulse against the chaos. Eliza, ever the dreamer, knelt beside James, her fingers tracing the contours of the corn with a tenderness that carved itself into my heart. "It's a sign," she insisted, her voice straining against the thrum of the night. "If we fight for it, we can turn this around. We can still make it." But I was tired. The fatigue clung to my bones like a shroud, dragging me into a deep abyss of despair. I remembered my own dreams, the ambitions that had driven me, the hopes that had soared like the larks above our heads. Were they all just echoes now? Night fell like a curtain, swallowing the sun whole, and in that moment, we stood together, tiny embers against the vastness of the universe. The stars blinked above, indifferent to our plight, and I felt the cool breath of the cosmos wrap around me. "Time is running out," I murmured, feeling the weight of the hours pressing down on us like a clock ticking in the dark. But just as I was about to surrender to the darkness, I saw Eliza's chin lift, her spirit soaring higher than the stars above us. "We've survived worse," she said, her voice a fierce whisper of rebellion. "Let them come. We'll fight." In that moment, the walls of despair crumbled just slightly, and I felt something shift within me, a spark, a flicker of resolve. Yes, we were broken, yes, we were stained and battered, but there was still a heartbeat, a rhythm pulsing under the surface, waiting to rise. I remembered the dreams of tomorrow, the laughter yet to be shared, and the warmth of sunlight against our skin. How could I let it all slip away? The shadows whispered still, but now they felt less like a prison and more like a challenge. "Together," I said, my voice cracking under the weight of unspoken fears and newfound hope. "We face it together." And as the night wrapped around us, we stood as witness to the struggle that lay ahead, the fight for survival, the quest for redemption. The harvest was not just the reaping of crops, it was the harvesting of our souls, the gathering of strength against the storm. And so, with the weight of the world pressing down upon us, we drew closer, our breaths mingling in the cool night air, a promise of what was to come, a whisper of a future just beyond the horizon. The struggle was far from over, and as we faced the dark, I felt the first flicker of dawn on the edge of my heart, igniting a fire that refused to be quenched. The sun hung low, like a blooded coin thrown into a well, its light a cruel reminder of what was at stake. Shadows stretched long across the fields, whispering secrets of toil and sacrifice. I stood there, breathless, the grit of the earth pressing into my palms as I gripped the wooden handle of the pitchfork. Every pulse of my heart echoed the labor that lay just ahead, harvest time. It was a moment thick with tension, electric with the promise of fate, and I could taste the bitterness on my tongue. I remember the air, heavy and ripe, thick with the scent of damp soil and ripening wheat, sweetened by the ghost of summer's warmth. I remember the way the sky seemed to tremble, as if unsure whether to bless us with rain or condemn us with drought. A desperate thought clawed at my mind: if we faltered, if the harvest failed, it wouldn't just be the crops that withered. It would be dreams, lives, families, ours shattered like glass in the hands of time. "Move faster," shouted Thomas, his voice a sharp blade cutting through the air, snapping me back to the present. His eyes, dark and stormy, burned with urgency. He was the kind of man who could command a field with a glance but carried the weight of his own failures like a yoke around his neck. I had seen him break under that weight before, the way his hands would tremble when he thought no one was watching. But today, he was all fire, all fury. He drove us with relentless fervor, as if fear could be our trun. And then there was Clara. Oh, Clara! She stood off to the side, her auburn hair wild, tossed by the wind, her face a canvas of exhaustion and determination. I caught her eye, and in that fleeting moment, I saw it, the flicker of something raw, something unpolished that lay just beneath the surface. A dream long abandoned, flickering like a candle in a storm. She was torn between the weight of duty and the pulsing rhythm of her unfulfilled ambitions, a melody that played softly in her heart but was drowned out by the cacophony surrounding us. "Let's go! We're losing the light!" Thomas barked again, and I could feel the urgency coiling around us, tightening like a noose. We plunged into the rows of golden stalks, and the crunch of dried leaves underfoot echoed in my ears, every step a reminder of what was at risk, each breath a silent prayer for providence. I remember the sweat trickling down my back like a river, a reminder of the price we paid for survival. The sun, a cruel overseer, bore down on our backs while we moved in rhythm, laboring with an intensity that threatened to break us. Each swing of the scythe felt like a dance of life and death, the blade slicing through the air, through our fears, through the very fabric of our existence. I could hear the whispers of the crops, a symphony of rustling leaves and creaking stalks, as if they sensed the urgency of the moment, the gravity of the harvest. "God help us," Clara murmured, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. I turned to her, catching a glimpse of the fear etched in her brow. Was it fear of failure? Or perhaps fear of the future? In that instant, I saw the weight of the world on her small shoulders, pressing down until it felt like she might crumble under the strain. I wanted to reach out, to pull her from the depths of her despair, but I was tethered, shackled by my own worries. "Keep moving!" Thomas shouted, his voice rising above the mounting tension. He was relentless, pushing us, driving us, and in that moment, I wondered if he could sense the crackling energy between Clara and me. Did he know that beneath the labor, beneath the sweat and the dirt, there was a yearning that flickered like a dying ember? The sun slipped further, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms across the field. Time slipped away, our labor stretching into an eternity, each moment heavy with unspoken words. I could feel the weight of Clara's gaze on me, her breath mingling with the dusk. I wanted to scream out that I was afraid of the harvest, afraid of not being enough, afraid of the inevitable confrontation with our own hearts. Then, just as the horizon swallowed the sun whole, a scream shattered the air, a sound like glass breaking and echoing through the stillness. It was Thomas, his face twisted in horror, hands grasping at a gnarled arm that had slipped beneath the weight of a fallen stalk. The world went silent, as if the very earth held its breath, and I felt my heart leap into my throat. "Clara!" I shouted, turning to see her frozen, eyes wide with disbelief. This was not just work, it was life and death, and we were caught in the crossfire. A sudden rush of adrenaline surged through me as I ran to Thomas, desperately pulling away the heavy stalks, but the earth felt alive, fighting back, as if it didn't want to release its hold on him. "Help me," he gasped, voice cracking, the desperation palpable in the dimming light. I could hear Clara's breath hitch beside me, the weight of the moment pressing down, and I was torn between the urgency of the task and the turmoil in my own heart. The labor demand surged around us, but it was more than just the harvest, it was the reckoning of our souls. "Stay with me, Thomas!" I cried, but inside, I grappled with all the fears that had haunted us as we toiled. I could hear Clara beside me, her soft whimpers melding with the shouts as we fought against the shadows. This was our moment, the critical intersection of life, labor, and consequence, where dreams were forged or shattered, and we were all fighting against the weight of what we could become. As the last light faded from the horizon, the darkness enveloped us, and I realized this was not the end, but merely a beginning, a twisted, heavy loop of tension that would draw us back into its embrace. The harvest was more than just grain, it was the culmination of our fears, our hopes, and our fragile humanity. And somewhere in that darkness, a reckoning awaited, whispering its secrets like the rustling leaves in the night. The sky crackled like a dry twig snapping underfoot, a sound that shook the air with foreboding. I stood there, breath caught in my throat, watching my dreams wither under the sun's merciless glare. The corn stalks, once vibrant and alive, drooped like forgotten thoughts, their golden husks turning to dust before my very eyes. The sun was no longer a friend, it was a tyrant, ruling over the land with a brutal hand, and I was but a mere witness to its tyranny. "It's coming," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as if it carried both the weight of her fear and the heaviness of the world around us. Her hands were clasped tightly together, knuckles white as she stared into the horizon, where the grey clouds loomed like a gathering army. I could see the tension etched across her face, each line a testament to sleepless nights and weary days spent praying for rain that never came. Sarah was fierce, but the relentless heat was turning her spirit to ash. "I remember the smell of the earth after a good rain," I said, my voice barely a whisper. A memory so vivid it felt like a ghost. The way the world breathed in relief, the colors snapping back to life. But those memories felt like whispers of a past long gone, drowned out by the cacophony of despair that filled the air now. "Do you honestly think it'll come?" She turned to me, eyes wide, searching for hope in my face, but all I could offer was the truth, the raw, ugly truth. A truth that had seeped into our lives like a weed, choking the optimism we once clung to. The truth was an unbearable weight, heavy like the clouds that lingered above us, threatening rain yet delivering only silence. There was a noise then, a distant rumble, not of thunder but of machinery. Ethan, my brother, was out there, working the fields, stubborn as the weeds that clung to the edges of our land. I could see him, a silhouette against the sun, moving with a frenetic energy that came from desperation, not hope. He was wrestling with the soil, trying to coax life from the barren earth, his hands filled with grit and determination. But even he, with his iron will, had grown tired. Even he was beginning to doubt. "It's like fighting shadows," I murmured, the words slipping from my lips like a confession. "We're chasing something that doesn't want to be caught. Those crops out there, they're ghosts of what we had." Ethan turned his head, catching my eye for a brief moment, and in that glance, I saw everything, the weight of responsibility, the flicker of fear, the unbreakable bond of family. He'd taken on the mantle of provider, but with each day that passed, I could feel him teetering on the edge of something darker. The soil beneath his feet had become a battleground, and he was losing. Sarah's hand found mine, squeezing tight, grounding me in the chaos swirling around us. "It's not just us," she said, a fierce whisper laced with urgency. "It's the whole town. Farmers are walking away, towns are shuttering. This isn't just a drought, it's a nightmare." The weight of her words sank in. The town was shifting, like the land beneath our feet, trembling under the strain of despair. I'd seen the ghostly outlines of neighbors in the grocery store, their eyes hollow, their carts full of nothing but essentials, bread, milk, and the lifeblood of our existence, hope, dwindling like the grain we depended on. Nature had turned cruel, the seasons no longer danced in harmony. The rains had become a fickle lover, teasing us with the promise of life, only to retreat, leaving us gasping for breath. Each day had morphed into a struggle, a battle against an unseen enemy. "I remember when the fields were lush," I said, a tremor in my voice. "When laughter filled the air like the scent of fresh earth. We were naive then." I could feel the tears prick at the edge of my vision, threatening to spill over. How could we have known? "Maybe we took too much for granted," Sarah replied, her voice a fragile thread. "We thought the world owed us its bounty. But it's not a debt, it's a gift." She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air between us. "And we've squandered it." The ground trembled then, not just underfoot but in our hearts, a seismic shift that reverberated through our souls. The air thickened with something ominous, an impending storm that had nothing to do with the weather. Ethan moved closer, his brow furrowed, the shadows in his eyes deepening. "We can't lose faith," he said, but his voice wavered, a fragile thread barely holding together. "We have to fight for this land." But what was there to fight for? The fields lay barren, and the future felt like a mirage, shimmering just out of reach. Each heartbeat echoed in the silence, a reminder of the ticking clock, the countdown to despair. "Maybe we're supposed to change," I whispered, and the weight of those words crushed me. "Maybe we're meant to find a new way, to adapt to what's coming." The thought was both terrifying and liberating, a dance on the edge of a blade. Sarah and Ethan exchanged a glance, a flicker of understanding passing between them. The world around us was shifting, and it was time to confront the reality we wished to avoid. The storms were coming, not just in the skies but within ourselves. The wind picked up, swirling around us like a chaotic dance, carrying with it the scent of rain and the promise of change. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it together, hearts intertwined like the roots of the crops we cherished. In that moment, as the clouds gathered and thunder rumbled in the distance, I realized something profound. We were not just farmers, we were warriors fighting for our very existence. The battle was not merely against the elements but against the ghosts of our own making, fears, doubts, and the haunting specter of a future we could not control. We stood together, three souls bound by the earth we cultivated, waiting for the storm that would inevitably come. And as I took a deep breath, I felt the air shift, the tension crackling, the promise of rain in the distance. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, life finds a way to push through the soil, to rise again. The storm was here, and with it, hope lingered like a flickering flame, fragile, yet unyielding. The ground crackled beneath me, a brittle reminder of summer's merciless grip. I stood there, heart pounding, the sun a merciless eye glaring down, as if it dared me to hope. Hope, that delicate, fluttering thing, had already been scorched to ash. A ghostly wind swept across the field, a whisper of what used to be a sea of golden wheat, now a patchwork of brittle stubble and despair. I could taste the bitterness on my tongue, that metallic tang of anxiety mixed with the dust of loss. I remember the faces of the people who once thrived here, their laughter ringing like wind chimes in the breeze. Now, silence reigned, thick and oppressive. Daniel, my brother, stood beside me, fists clenched, eyes narrowed against the unforgiving sun. His brow glistened with sweat, but it wasn't the heat that made his face glisten. It was anger, raw and unfiltered. "We can't lose this crop, Leah," he said, each word a jagged stone in the air. "If we do, it's over. No more farm. No more us." The desperation in his voice sent shivers through the marrow of my bones. I remembered the dreams we spun as children, big, bright pictures of the future, painted with the colors of hope and resilience. But that was before the skies turned against us. I closed my eyes and could almost hear the thunder, the storms that used to come, bearing the promise of rain and life. Now, the clouds were ghostly specters, parched and unwilling. I felt them mocking us, their white laughter echoing as they drifted away, leaving us to wither under the relentless sun. I could see the cracks in the soil, like the lines on an old man's face, each one telling a story of neglect and despair. "Do you remember last year?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "The storms? The floods?" It was a haunting echo, a memory dipped in dread. We lost half our crop then, the rains came like a break-up text, unexpected and devastating. The deluge washed away not just the soil but our dreams. "It's happening again, Danny," I said, every syllable a shard of ice sliding down my spine. He turned to me, eyes wild with fear, and I saw it all, the shadows of doubt creeping into his heart. But he couldn't let those shadows win, he wouldn't. "We have to plant more drought-resistant seeds," he insisted, voice rising, desperation morphing into determination. "We can adapt. We can survive this." The irony cut deep. To adapt, to survive, we were fighting against something vast and indifferent. Climate change was a monster lurking in the shadows, its breath hot against our necks, whispering promises of ruin. It was in every weather pattern, every shifting season. Nature was no longer our ally, it had become a vengeful force. As the sun dipped lower, the horizon blazed, a canvas of fiery colors that should have filled me with awe. Instead, it felt like an omen, a reminder that beauty could be as treacherous as it was alluring. Those colors painted a picture of extinction, of crops wilting under a sky that held no mercy. I could taste the fear in the air, thick and suffocating, a premonition of what lay ahead. I looked over at Daniel. "What if we can't fix this? What if it's too late?" His gaze shifted to the horizon, where the sun kissed the earth goodbye, leaving an unsettling darkness in its wake. "Then we fight," he replied, voice steady yet laced with uncertainty. "We fight until our last breath." The fire in his heart flickered, and I reached for his hand, our fingers intertwining, a silent pact forged in the furnace of our shared fears. But then, as if the universe intended to remind us of our fragility, a single raindrop fell from the sky, splattering against my cheek. I looked up, hope igniting like a match. Then another drop, and another, until it became a torrent. I felt it wash over me, cool and cleansing, a momentary lullaby to my longing heart. Daniel raised his face, eyes closed, catching droplets with the fervor of a desperate man. But the moment shattered. The rain turned to a downpour, heavy and relentless, transforming the dry earth into a churned-up nightmare. It was all so familiar, the chaos of previous seasons replaying like a haunting melody. I felt overwhelmed, the weight of loss crashing into me like a tidal wave. We were drowning, not in water but in the very essence of our existence. I turned to Daniel, and our eyes met, two souls adrift in a storm we could not control. What if the land doesn't forgive us? My voice trembled, steeped in the sorrow of countless generations who had tread this land. Then we make them remember us, he whispered fiercely, clutching my hand tighter, as if holding on could alter the course of fate. We become part of the earth, Leah. They'll know our names. The downpour continued, the fields transforming into muddy graves for our dreams. And as the rain fell, I felt the universe swirling around us, vivid and chaotic. The clouds were no longer just water, they were ghosts, ancient spirits watching over us, judging us. I remembered the clock ticking, marking time as the season shifted, relentless and unyielding. Every heartbeat seemed to echo in the stillness, a reminder of our mortality. We could battle nature, but time? Time was the true enemy, slipping through our fingers like the very soil we depended on. My heart raced, a frantic dance of hope and despair, while the shadows of uncertainty loomed large. The world felt bigger than us, overwhelming and indifferent, yet in that moment, with rain soaking through our skin, I realized that we were not alone. And as the tempest raged on, I clung to Daniel, our shared fears and unquenchable hope intertwining like the roots of the crops we desperately needed to sustain us. The storm was just the beginning, a prelude to the battle we were about to face. What lay ahead was unknown, a swirling vortex of possibility and dread, but one thing was certain, we would fight. We would not let the land forget our names. We would carve our place into the earth, one heartbeat at a time.